evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the Dees almost blew a 39-point lead against perpetual cellar dwellers, the Kangaroos, as Demon fans slunk away from the MCG, feeling like the 2024 season is rapidly slipping away from us. Joining me tonight to dissect a win that felt like a loss is veteran Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Andy. Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Ben Man. Good evening to all our faithful listeners. This week I worked out why they don't sell razor blades at Melbourne Football Club games, and I know all those security arrangements that are in place outside the ground are designed to stop the Melbourne supporters bringing them in as well. So it's pretty obvious what's been going on. I now know the answers.
Lucky one of our sponsors is Hertz then.
It's not very often you can walk away from the G after a win and feel like you're going to or coming from a funeral, but that's sort of what it felt like, especially rocking up to Demonland at any point on the weekend and into this week. Joining us tonight to perhaps give some Dees fans some hope as we head off like lambs to the slaughter at the Gabbatoir on Friday night is Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And I hope's not really the word. I think a bit of perspective is the word. And I mean, in all seriousness, the psychology is quite bizarre. As an example, Cameron Ling on Sunday was on the ABC show that they do, on the midday show. And I'll reference a bit. They did a really good interview with Max that I'll speak to a little bit later, bits and pieces of his interview. But he was asked about who he sees as the bolder outside the Sydney and Blues being the number one and number two pick. And he said Pies. Not anyone else on the panel said anything. No one said, what are you talking about, the Pies? No one responded in any way curious or shocked or surprised. It's the Pies, right? So the Pies are 4 points more than us at this point of the season. So we're past the halfway mark. We're 10th on the ladder. We're equal number of points with 8th. 4 points from the Pies, who are, as I say, who are there in 4th place. So we're only 4 points from 4th place. And people are carrying on, like you said, like a funeral. Now, the psychology of it is they got beaten. They only beat the Pies by a point.
No.
Anyone say, well, is that so? What's the difference? The difference is they came back. Right, they came back and everyone was, if you're a Pies fan, was cock a hoop. Oh, well, we were 40 points down. We're such a remarkable footy team where we came back. But the narrative could have been, well, they were 40 points down against that team that we played on the weekend. So Ling rates the Pies. Fair enough. Okay, I do too, actually, and I said that a few weeks ago. Well, they only beat the Roos by a point. We beat them by 3 points. The Roos played really well against... so we're 3 times better. The Roos played really well against the Pies. They played an excellent game of footy. I don't know if you watched it. I did. And they were excellent. They stopped to a walk. I was really shocked that they didn't stop to a walk in this. I fully expected them to. In fact, it was us who stopped for a walk. But the fact remains that we won the game by more than Collingwood won the game the previous week. And no one. Like honestly, are you writing the Pies off? Because if it's a funeral based on that result on the against the Roos, well, the logic is clear then the Pies are equally hopeless. They've already beaten by a point.
No, man, the Pies have got some upside because they've got players to come back and we haven't.
Oh, Melksham is not coming back. Lever's not coming back. Give me a break, Melksham. Lever's in our top 5 players. He's coming back, is he not?
Yeah, one player.
It's not just that.
Melksham's coming back. That's 2 players.
Come
on.
Big man, you say that we're 4 points behind the Pies, but you've got to have a look.
All right, we're on board the Pies train, are we?
No, forget the Pies. I don't care about the Pies. I'm just looking at who we've beaten this year and who we haven't. And we have not beaten anyone, or when we played them, they were nobody.
We've gone past the halfway point of the season. We've played all the same teams that Pies have played.
Yeah, and we've
got a very good number of games to determine, and we've got this thing called the ladder. And on the ladder, they're 4 points and 7% clear of us.
And they will remain that easily.
Right. Well,
we've got to
And
play
more.
5 teams inside the 8 and 2 outside the 8, including Brisbane this week and Gold Coast. We'll be lucky if we win any of those games.
Yeah,
Right, we'll see.
I absolutely
We'll see.
agree.
We'll
I absolutely agree. I mean, okay, all right. I just sometimes you can't convince some people. So
and the psychology, my point is the psychology of it. No one's bagging the pies because they won, because they came back. So we were 8 points up. We played probably our 2 best quarters of footy for a long time, the first and the third quarters. No one would argue with that. They were 25 points at halftime, 38 points at 37 points at 3/4 time. The psychology is because they came back and we could have lost, but we didn't. They got within 3 points with 4 minutes and 35 seconds on the clock. And we did a fantastic effort, given they had all the momentum, to hang on and win that game. It was brilliant defensive effort. So, like the wrist slashing and on the back of a loss is just absurd, just from my perspective.
I don't think our defensive efforts are probably the biggest criticism of our team going forward. It's our ability to put winning scores on the board, and we're coming up against a team, and we'll talk about it later in the preview, who can put a winning score on the board, and we're going to have to put a winning score on the board, and I just do not think that we can do that. But all right, let's get the housekeeping out of the way, and then we'll get into talking, because each week I do put the call out to our loyal listeners to help us out, give us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'd love the feedback, and we do reward our loyal listeners who do take the time out to provide those 5-star reviews by giving them a shout-out on the show. We're going to give Chris a shout-out as he writes, "Great pod, love the pod. Definitely the most comprehensive analysis of all Demon fan podcasts available. I definitely identify as an Andy." It's the first time I've being used as being identified as with B-Man's
That's a verb.
with B-Man's constant excuses sometimes making me audibly lol whilst listening. How this club hasn't broken him, and we've just seen he's still not broken. After this long of being a supporter, he's a marvel whose brain should be studied. Can't wait to hear what he comes up with tonight. And this review was from a few weeks ago. I'm holding some back. Can't wait to hear what he comes up with tonight. Something a bit more creative than loading is required. One would think a dodgy Palmer the night before, perhaps a go Dees. Well, thanks for the feedback, Chris. And B-Man, you have the right to reply to that insult to you, but I will remind you that they did give this podcast 5 stars, so please treat them nicely. Go into bat for yourself.
No, all good, Chris, all good.
If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and you want to leave us feedback or post a comment or a question for the show, post under our podcast post each week, or just slide into our DMs. We won't read out your full name on the show. And in addition to being available on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and all your preferred podcasting apps, the Dreamland Podcast is available to be watched and listened to on YouTube. Just search for Dreamland Podcast, find the channel. Don't forget like and subscribe. If you want to chat with other Demon fans, if you've never been to our forum, head on over to demonland.com. Sign up. You can chat with other Demon fans from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free. And in addition to being able to post questions or comments for this show, there are also a plethora of topics and threads discussing all things demons related. So join in on the conversation. It's a lot of fun when we get to argue with each other. So if you'd like to join us on the air tonight to talk about any of the topics we're going to talk about, please give us a call on 039016 3666, 039016 3666. I'll answer. I'll put you on mute, and I'll bring you on when there's a break in the conversation. And during the week, give that number a call, leave us a message, we'll play it on the show. And if you're listening to us live, come join us in the chat room. Head on over to demonland.com/podcast. We are live every Monday, so if you want to listen to the show live, then head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. And yes, I am aware it is Tuesday night tonight because, George, you had the most Melbourne supporter excuse for not being on the show last night. A board meeting. How much Melbourne more Melbourne can you get? Except, or going to the snow. Let's get into the match overview. The Demons almost blew a 39-point lead, eventually holding on and narrowly edging out the Kangaroos with a 3-point victory at the MCG. The Dees started the match with a sense of urgency, knowing that their season was precariously balanced Early goals from Petty and Pickett saw Melbourne establish a lead. However, their inability to maintain consistent pressure allowed North to stay within touching distance. By halftime, the Demons led by a modest margin. Trent Rivers' spectacular run and goal just before the main break gave the Demons some breathing room and showcased his emerging talent in a new midfield role, stepping up in the absence of the injured Christian Petrarca. The third quarter saw the Demons extend their lead significantly, kicking away to a game-high 39-point lead as they piled on 5-2. Stephen May's defensive prowess was on full display as he kept North's key forward Nick Larkey goalless. The final quarter was a dramatic contrast. North Melbourne were awarded 2 dubious free kicks, resulting in goals as they mounted a comeback, and they end up kicking the last 6 goals unanswered, bringing the margin down to a mere 3 points with minutes left on the clock. Melbourne's forward line, which has shown signs of dysfunction throughout the season when scoreless in the last term. Debutant Kynan Brand's crucial tackle on Nick Larkey with 90 seconds remaining was pivotal. I can't talk tonight. This, along with Harry Petty's last-second clearance, helped Melbourne hang on despite the relentless pressure from the Kangaroos. The win keeps the Demons' 2024 season on life support, as Whispering Jack mentioned in his match report, as they remain in the hunt for finals contention, albeit barely, except that's not according to B-Man. So I think we'll get straight into the stats files rather than, because we're going to hear both of your thoughts on aspects of the games with the questions. But before B-Man does his deep dive into the stats, we had a poster that had B-Man and his stats files in the crosshairs. The Pearl writes, as an old coach once said to me, if you have to rely on stats, then you are not watching a game. And once again, B-Man, you have the right of reply, and then you can delve into your stats files. Anything to say to the Pearl? I know you did say something to him in the thread, but...
Yeah, to the Pearl. I actually was almost positive that was George. Because when I do the stats file every week, loyal listeners, we've got a video feed and I can see George sort of rolling his eyes and sort of nodding off as I'm doing the stats file. So I was pretty confident it was the Pearl. So I went back in and checked some of his posting or their posting history. I'm not sure Pearls are they or him or her. Not too many posts, but joined a long time ago, way back in 2008. So really one of the originals. And I figured this wasn't probably George, but it might have been. I'm not entirely sure. So way back.
It's a pretty big accusation to level at an administrator or a moderator of the Demonland Forum. So, George, do you have anything to say?
I haven't said anything negative about the Pearl. I'm just saying that I think he doesn't rate stats. But way back in 2017, this caught my attention from the Pearl. AFL.com.au shows no respect for us by putting Oscar McDonald in our best 22. So it might have been George, but I can't recall him being an OMAC hater. Well, look, my response to the Pearl on Demonland was that how old was the coach? And then Pearl responded to say that they thought I was playing the man. So now you're playing the man, not the ball. They wrote this could be seen as a meaningless pressure act, which was quite a good pun. I thought I didn't really think that was playing the man. I was going a bit easy. So I do definitely like stats. And one of the things that for me, the stats, as I've talked about before, is that I watch the game and live and watch the replay live. I've got no idea except what scrolls on the television. I don't really look at the numbers during the game, but I really, I've talked about this before, but I really like to try and understand the game, and the stats really help me understand the game afterwards when you've got, the emotions out of it and you can sit back and analyse and think about it a bit, and it just helps me understand and contextualise what I've watched. And others may not, that's fine, and just trust their eyes, each to their own, I guess. But so tonight's stats file is dedicated to the Pearl. And I thought it was a really fascinating set of stats, partly because it did help me understand and get a much better sense of the game when you strip out some of that angst about how this game, so much of it I think was around what them coming back and us almost losing it, but we didn't. We were in front for the entire game, so we never were not in front in that game of footy. And I'll talk to one of the reasons why I think that we basically ran out of gas in that last quarter. No shock, this happens every time at this point of the season. was a really interesting game, I thought, in terms of the red and blueprint. So going back to that again, the sort of way we're trying to play a bit differently this year, with a focus, as always, a focus on defence and contest, but much more focus on transition back half football, with scores from defensive half being the key indicator for that, and scores from turnover being an important statistic was last year, but critical this year in terms of telling us whether this model is working. And fitness is absolutely key to our game, and it's definitely hard to measure. I thought the game was interesting from the perspective that after playing a much more forward half, sort of older style goody game against the Pies, we really reverted to this model that we've been playing, which, a reminder that I think that will revert to our forward half come finals, as indicated by the sort of two key metrics that in the last few years have been the most important, or up there for most important, which is time in forward half and metres gained. So we were negative 264 metres gained in this match. Time in forward half was 50-50 in the first quarter, 43-57 in the second quarter, 57-43 in the third quarter, and 40-60 for a 47-53 split for the match. Last year, that would have been in a win, even a narrow win, 3 points would have been 55-45 or 60-40. So it's sort of good indication that we were playing that sort of back half transition footy, or trying to. So going through the sort of categories, our defence, obviously the best metric is opposition score. They were only 25, as I mentioned before, only 25 points at halftime and 37 points at three-quarter time is excellent defensively. Fantastic defensive effort to that point. 5 goals in the last quarter, not so much. Nonetheless, 67 points is, a pretty good effort keeping the Roos to that total. And the Roos got, as I noted, within 3 points with 4 minutes 35 seconds on the clock, and they had all the momentum. That's an age in footy. That's a long time, and it felt like that at the ground. That was one of the other factors that I felt. I didn't walk out feeling like we'd lost. I felt walking out. I said to my friend that I walked out with. He had that same energy. I think just consider how bad we would both feel if we'd lost that game. So I was absolutely overjoyed that we got. We won it, but that was a very long 4 minutes 35. Brilliant defensive efforts, and the obvious one was Brown Dog, junior pup, running down. Who was it? It was Larky, wasn't it? So intercept marks were not bad, down to 12-14. Intercepts in total 71-67. Marks inside 50, we gave up 9. We took 9 ourselves, but we gave up 9, which is not too bad. The contest is fundamental. Defense and contest for Goody are two fundamentals that no matter what game plan we're playing are going to be key to our game. I use this as a reference point because arguably our best win for the season, arguably our best game for the season was against the Cats. We had 127 contested possessions in that match to the Cats 124. In this week, we had 135. They were amazing. And I think a lot of credit should go to the Roos. They were terrific in the contest for the entire match. As I said, I fully expected them to fade in the last quarter, as they did against the Pies and as they did against the Eagles the previous week. But they didn't. Their pressure and contest was terrific from the very first bounce right to the end. The Roos really, they easily could have walked away with a win, and if they did, it would have been a deserved win. I thought they played terrific. But I think that's really interesting. 135 contested possessions, as I said, in the Cats game, 127. So 8 more than the game that many would consider the best we've played this season. Post-clearance is always an important one. So post-clearance, hardball gets, we had 15 to the Roos 11. So we're really good winning the contest ball with a hardball get after the clearance, post-clearance. Again, comparing to the Cats game, I thought that was a good reference point, given no one was complaining about the victory that night or the performance that night against the Cats. For the match, we had 176 to 170 was the total pressure for the match. In the fourth quarter, it was 193 to 181. This week, our total match pressure was 189 to a very impressive Roos 195. So they just shaded us for pressure in that match. But So we had a higher pressure rating in what was a pretty sort of fierce game against the Cats, against the Roos outfit. So I thought that was really interesting. You noted, Andy, that they came out harder. It was interesting. I thought we played all right in that first quarter. The ball was moving around a bit more than it did for the rest of the match, so that might explain this pressure. But our pressure was only 163 to their 174, so we were down 11 pressure points in that first quarter. We raised it a bit in the second quarter, still down 195. They were at to 185, so 10 more. This was super impressive, I thought. In the third quarter, we came out 224 off the top of my head. I think there's probably only maybe 3 or 4 quarters for the entire season so far where we've applied more pressure. But they were pretty impressive as well, 197 in that third quarter. So we were plus 27 for pressure rating, which in that third quarter, remembering 200 is considered elite. So that's a fantastic effort in that quarter. So, we applied more pressure in that match against the Cats. Partly that was how the game was played, I thought, but again, credit to the pressure that the Roos applied. Our top 5 pressure players this week were Nibbler, magnificent, just fantastic game by him from contest and pressure and leadership perspective. 33 pressure acts, 80 pressure points. His season average is 54.4. That just gives an indication of how much pressure he applied and how much he lifted for this game. Kate Chandler was interesting. This completely surprised me. I've been a bit down on Kate's form in the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks. His season average is 47.2 pressure points. He managed 61 pressure points in this game. Just as a sort of indication of Nibbler's game, he had 33 individual pressure acts. Number 2 was Kate Chandler, equal with Trent Rivers, who also had 23. They had second most, 23, so 10 more pressure acts than the second most. Trent Rivers, as I noted, he played a lot of time on the ball. Just looking at these numbers, defenders always are low on the pressure rating. So Trent River was went to 19 bounces, which was remarkable. I doubt he's ever done that in his career, or not in his AFL career anyway. He had 52 pressure points. His season average is 24, so more than twice his season average for pressure points. Jack Viney was our 4th. He had 45. He was below his season average, but his season average is 60, which is crazy. And Tommy Sparrow was bang on his season average with 20 pressure acts and 45. Again, looking at tackles and tackles inside 50, comparing it to the Cats game. In the Cats game, we had 67 tackles, 55 only in this one. Tackles inside 50 in the Cats game was 15, and we had 13 in this game, 11 more than the Roos. So tackles inside 50 was 13 to 2, so plus 11 for tackles inside 50, and 55 to 51 all up. Ground ball gets, this tracks with when we're playing that sort of transition game, our ground ball get numbers go right down, and it did. So again, comparing it to the Cats game, we had 76 ground ball gets. In that game, we had 85 in this game. We were down 12 against the Cats, and we were down 10 against the Roos. Clearance, just the raw totals. So really, these are arguably not that meaningful, the clearances, so I might stop looking at them. But just the raw numbers, we had 3 fewer centre clearances, 10 to 13, and 4 fewer stoppage clearances, 25 to 29. There's a territory factor there, I guess, so that probably should be factored in. But really, it's not about quantity of clearances; it's about quality of clearances. As the key metric for that is what you score from them. Contested marks 10 to 11, so their marking was terrific. Partly to do with our kicking. I thought we kicked to their advantage a lot during this match. I thought, but they also did. They took some very excellent marks right through the match. So 10 to 11. Transition from back half, this was a pretty disappointing number, and Goody wouldn't have been happy with this, partly to do with we turned the ball over a fair bit, but our season average for points from defensive half is 30.7. We only managed 25, and we gave up 37. Our season average is 29 of all teams. So they sort of got us on the turnover a fair bit, which is evidenced by the next number. We were down 13, so for scores from turnover, which is an issue for us. 5-3-33 we scored scored on turnover to 7-4-46 that the Roos got, and so 11 scoring shots on turnover to 8 for 13 less points, and that was a big factor in the game. And we were it wouldn't have been a shock for them to win on the numbers. On expected score, they won that game by 2 points. So, it was interesting. Our accuracy was a big factor in us winning the game. And so that's another real positive, is particularly you could see how up and about they were when Petty slotted his goal. I was really happy that that Turner slotted his goal as well. So, our accuracy basically won the game, which is a huge positive. So stoppage, one of the other interesting things was stoppages. So there's been a lot of talk about our midfield this season. A real positive in this game is our season average for scores from stoppages is low for us because it's been less of a focus, 22.4. But we scored 31 points from stoppages in this game. So we were plus 12 from stoppages other than centre bounces, 5-1-31 to 3-1-19 for stoppages. And as I said, that's 9 points above our season average from stoppages around the ground. So that's a terrific result, and particularly given the sort of criticism that Clary, I know we'll get to that, copped. So, if you just read Demonland, you'd think we got flogged in the stoppages, but no, we were plus 16 from scores from stoppages. One goal straight, 6 points to 2 points from centre bounces, so plus 16 overall. Fitness was clearly an issue. We stopped to a walk in the last quarter. We'll get into that a little bit later, but we were totally gassed. North Melbourne kicked in that last quarter, we were totally gassed. North Melbourne kicked the last 6 goals of the match. From late in the third quarter, not only did they not concede a score, that's the Roos, they also won the disposals 129 to 82, contested possessions 51 to 43, clearances 15 to 9, centre bounce clearances 5 to 2, inside 50s 23 to 11, and 27 to 19 tackle count. So they really smashed us in that last few minutes of the third quarter and the last the fourth quarter. And for me, that was clear sort of evidence of the fact we were gassed. I mentioned the expected score was 55 to 62.7. So on expected score, they win that game by a tick over a goal. So they played really well. I thought the Roos, they right from their first bounce to the end, they really fought it out. I mentioned some of the contested ball numbers. Loose ball gets was really interesting inside our forward 56 to 17 and down 11. And we'll talk about Fritter later, and I wonder whether that was a factor, but, that's not a great number. And the post clearance I mentioned before, hard ball gets was +4 post clearance, but our loose ball gets were -10. And I don't know that Goody would be pleased with that number. That might have blown out in the last quarter when we'd stopped to a walk, because the loose ball gets, you'd think logically are at least partly fitness related. All these numbers are. Centre bounce attendances was interesting. As I mentioned, Trent Rivers went to 20 centre bounces, which is amazing. The only person on the ground who had more was Maxi Gawn, who had 21. Clayton Oliver went to 17. Jack Viney 14. Tommy Sparrow did more midfield load this week at 13. He's only did 2 last week, I think, from memory. And Cozzy was in there 9 times. And just a weird stat, Melbourne and sort of, I think this is not flying under the radar because I bang on about how badly we kick, but our handball's been all over the shop in the last few weeks. Melbourne, in the second term, Melbourne recorded just 2 effective handballs from 7 total handballs. And that's really pretty poor, isn't it? And by way of contrast, North Melbourne had 15 effective handballs from their 19. So good performance statistically, impressive performance from the Roos. There's a lot to like there. Our last quarter fade out was pretty dramatic. If you think a lot of our numbers were we gained in those first 3 quarters. So I think that fitness told in the end. I was really surprised how well the Roos ran it out, but it wasn't nearly as bad a game. The numbers are very comparable to the Cats game. So, probably a good day where the eyes maybe didn't, weren't so accurate as perhaps the stats might have been.
Oops, I was on mute. Is that all from the stats?
Yes.
Okay, let's get stuck into it. Before we get into the negativity, and spoiler alert, there is a lot of negativity coming from the win. We have a little bit of positivity from a new poster on Demonland. McVeasy, like a Sunday morning, writes, "Hi guys, I'm a huge fan of the podcast, so thank you so much for giving me something to look forward to every Monday, or in this case Tuesday. I'd love your thoughts on something. On just about every forum I've checked since the game, I've seen a consistent narrative that this didn't feel like a win or we didn't deserve the win. I'm still seeing the regular refrain of Sack Goodwin and phrases like absolutely disgraceful, lack of effort and soft getting thrown around. I'm not sure I was watching the same game. I saw a much more cohesive team performance, the guys actually looking like they were enjoying themselves. I saw a solid spread of goal kickers and more of the accuracy we've all been quite rightly desperate for. I thought the vibe seemed much better, and there seemed to be a real emphasis on celebrating each other's achievements. Seeing just about everyone get around Harry Petty after his goal was a highlight. I can only imagine he's been having a real tough time with recovery, and it was interesting to hear Maxi reference the criticism Petty has been copying from fans in his post-match interview. I guess my question is, was it as bad as everyone is saying it was? And do you feel there is less virtue in hanging on for a win than grabbing it from an opposition's clutches after coming from behind? I'm being a bit facetious, but does it feel like that's how this is being framed? Either way, maybe I'm in denial, but I thought there was plenty of positives and was really proud of how he held through a very spirited North performance. And absolutely no disrespect to the Roos either. I thought they came to play. Thanks, guys." Pitmaster adds, "There was a bit to like about the game. Petty's marking upfield and his smart play to assist Cozzie's goal was sharp work. The Colt with 2 cool goal assists was a positive, as was Rivers in the midfield and Brown's cameo. May was a champion, but for his brain fade moment, and Turner looked better both in the air and kicking for goal." So, George, we've heard from Big Man about the positives. Are there any positives that you can take from the game that the Demons almost coughed up to a team that has only won 14 out of their last 100-odd games?
Yeah, there's always some positives. Unfortunately, the positives were very, very small in this game. Let's not forget, we had 15 shots at goal against a team that sits on the bottom of the ladder and has been basically there for the last couple of years. It's just continued the same mode of play that we've seen over the last month from the Demons. It's not easy to forget that we've already lost against West Coast. We were smashed by Collingwood. We managed to win against St Kilda. We were absolutely, utterly smashed by Fremantle. It's just been a consistent performance over the last month, and this game was no different. What I thought about, there were far too many players in the side who just were not contributing. There were quite a few who were in an extra contribution. If you look at the tackles, we had 6 players with 0 tackles. Bowie, Fritsch, May, McVie, Turner and Howes all had 0 tackles. Clayton Oliver had 1. Fortunately, we had people like Rivers with 6, Viney with 6, Caleb Windsor with 6, Neil Bullen with 9, Chandler with 8. So even if you're not playing well, you can always tackle and put in. But we've got half a dozen players who did very, very little in this game. I don't know what's going on in terms of the preparation of the players. We had 11 players who played less than 80% game time. There's something seriously wrong with the amount of time that some players are playing on the field. Thank goodness we had people like Stephen May and T-Mac and a couple of the other backmen playing 100% that enabled this to happen. But something seriously is happening with the way the players are being managed. I was impressed as Pitmaster, was it? I think. Noted Stephen May was just fantastic in the game. Everybody forgets he kept Larkey to 1 point. Larkey is a great full forward, absolutely superb, and he's kept him to 1 point. It just continues his denial of leading full forwards from other sides who seem to kick bags of goals in any game other than when they're playing against Stephen May. So thanks for him. The fact that we're 6 goals up against a side that's won 1 game for the season. We didn't score from the 25 with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter for the whole of the last quarter. We didn't score. I think people need to get their head around that. It wasn't surprising they came back, apart from the umpiring decisions that we'll talk about that enabled that. But we didn't score. We didn't do anything in that last quarter. That's a really telling thing for a side that's supposed to be playing in finals by the end of this season. I just can't see it anymore, unfortunately. Thank goodness for May and Viney and Gawn and Rivers and Petty and these guys who were putting in, because there were an awful lot of players out there who either couldn't or wouldn't.
Thank you, George. Man, any more positives you want to?
Now I know George isn't the pearl, because he picked a few quotes there, and it's interesting that he picked one about Chandler, because, as I noted, he was our second highest pressure rated player on the ground, and we had our tackles inside 50. I'm sure he mustn't have done many of them, but we'll talk about it a bit later. But to me, that we ran out of gas. The question is whether this is part of a program that's planned, and that and if so, and I'll talk to some of the sort of numbers around this time of year in a second. If it's not, as I said a few weeks ago, then of course we are in trouble. I think that it is the buy period, and I'll go through some data, more some more stats around, a conversation that we've had on the podcast now. This is 21, 22, this is the fourth year we've had this same conversation at exactly the same point in the season. So, there were a lot of positives. I take George's point, it's around particularly the fade out, but there was a lot to like on the night.
Let's talk turnovers. Nairobi Demon says, is there a problem with our inability to capitalise on turnover in the back half? Is it primarily method or skill? The family has been away the last 2 weekends, so I've watched more non-Melbourne games than usual. When other teams turn the ball over, they spread the ball with players running past 1 to 2 metres wide of the ball holder, with the effect that they spread out from the contests. It reminds me of our running in waves method in 2021. However, we seemed to want to go to a more direct line forward rather than wide. This means we often attempt to loop the ball forward over the opposition players. This loopy technique, if I may call it that, also seems to have undermined our handball technique in general play, with players looping their handballs when it's not necessary. Bring back the running in waves method, I say. And why do so many of our players look surprised to receive the ball? There must be confusion over the method, or alternatively, the players are so bereft of confidence that they think of the ball as a hot potato. Love the pod, keep up the good work. On the flip side of turnovers, JJ Broken says, well, whatever you think of stats, in my opinion, I think it's pretty clear what's going wrong statistically. We are getting murdered on turnovers, and that's unrelated to stoppage and clearance issues, which are secondary. 48 turnovers this week, 61 against the Pies, I think 90 against Freo. You can see it happening every week, and it's cringeworthy. We are moving the ball too fast by players that suck at kicking and decision-making. Rivers has to play in the middle for the rest of the year. He isn't elite, but he's not an absolute butcher of the ball like the rest of them. So, B-Man, we've had many people concerned about us when our opposition turns the ball over and that we're not taking enough advantage of it, and conversely, that we're getting murdered when we turn over the footy. How are you seeing that stats-wise?
Well, I think they're both really excellent points. Both questions raise really good points. And I think, I've talked about this. I think our method at the moment is about, is not the method that we will use come finals. I mentioned that this was a game that that was looking like more of our that Collingwood was looking more like how I think we'll play come finals, and that this was reverting back to the transition game that Goody's been trying to implement up until this stage in the season. But one thing I meant to say is that I don't know this number, but I suspect just from watching the game, and again, this is where stats are helpful to get an understanding of it, because I might be wrong on this, but my feeling was that we were kicking longer this match, in that we were looking to do less short. So there's probably, I didn't have a look, the uncontested mark, for instance. The Roos really is another team that looked to really hurt us with uncontested marks. They were up 20 uncontested marks in about 15 minutes. And I suspect that's because other teams know that we're not fully wound up at the moment and looking to exploit it by looking to spread us. And we looked a little bit like we were trying to sort of play a hybrid of the back half transition game, but kicking longer to a contest. And we had Petty coming up the ground and competing, Turner coming up at the ground and competing, Maxi being involved in a lot of marking contests, T-Mac as well. But a couple of those points is that I absolutely think one of the problems for us with the turnover game is our skills. I've been talking about this for ages, for years and years and years, about our relative lack of foot skills. That really hurts us, particularly on the transition game. You don't need, you need good skills across the board, but, all teams have poor kicks. You just need, a good handful, 3, 4, 5 elite level kicks who can, take on, someone like a Kitty Coleman or a Nick Dacos, so they can take on those high-risk kicks. We don't have many of them. I like Rivers on the ball too, but you're robbing Peter to pay Paul with him not in the back line, because, I didn't check his metres gained, but I bet it's way down on his average, just because, I want him coming off that half-back flank. What we really need is Salem hitting those targets, Bowie hitting those targets. He's been way down. And then the other factor, so I think that's the turnover game. Why do we get killed? Is that, we're the other is our foot skills, but the other factor, as I said before, our handballing has been terrible in the last 2 or 3 weeks. All of those things. The other challenge for us is we're trying to implement a method after 4 years of Goody drilling in another method. So and no wonder that they're struggling and look confused a bit. And the final piece of the puzzle, I'd say, and I've made this point every year about the impact of fitness. It doesn't matter what game you play, but any of this, the transition game is absolutely fundamental, is you need to be super fit. And talking about Collingwood, I predicted a few weeks ago that Collingwood would be on the rise too. So I'm on board what Ling was saying. They were completely gassed at the first start of the season and could not play the transition game. Now their fitness is a lot better. This is the Pies, and their transition game and turnover game is looking a complete. You watch a Pies game now compared to round one, opening round 1, 2, or 3. They're completely different because they're able to spread their. The other thing about that sort of ability to spread is on transition, you need to provide options. And if you're not running on top of the ground, you cannot run to space to provide an option. And so I suspect that was part of the reason why I think that we were kicking longer. And again, I don't know that. That's just a vibe feeling that we're kicking longer to a contest. I think we're going to be looking fitter and sharper over the next few weeks, and I think that we'll start running in waves in this back half of the season. But, if I was going to pick one thing why we struggle on turnover, it's our poor skills.
I was just trying to look up on the AFL site for metres gained for Trent Rivers to see if I could get the stats, but unfortunately when you look up individual players, they don't give the metres gained under any category, so...
559 he had in this match was actually a lot better than I thought. So that's probably...
I wanted to compare his year on year or even average. And
I can find his season and average. No worries.
It's always pretty high because he kicks so long.
Yeah.
Gets lots of distance. Yeah. But right, Ben Man, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul because he's probably our best option coming out of the half-back line in transition. And I don't think we've actually got any decent runners in the half-back line. When you look at the people who Collingwood have got available, Brisbane have got available, they've got some serious runners. We don't. People who can sprint, and you're going to get caught trying to handball to people who are, either not fast or are static. And it certainly hasn't been helped by the fact that Bowie has certainly dropped the bundle since he's come back, but we don't have too many other options.
Yeah.
Salem's been hasn't looked all that much, but he's played a couple of good games, but he's not delivering in that way, and he's being expected to handball as well under this new style. So I don't know that it suits our particular players that we've
No,
got.
it doesn't. The style does, which is why I think, why I'm not too worried, because I don't think it'll be the style that we play in come finals. You guys probably aren't worried about playing finals, but
unless there's a
other one, George, is
repechage or a
McVie.
wild card round. No.
McVee's our sort of equivalent to Nick Dacos in a way, in terms of his foot skills and ability. But other teams, I thought he had a really good game on the weekend. His poise was critical. He was so important defensively. I thought he was a big factor in his calmness in that last 10 minutes of the game. But teams are clearly putting work into McVie and limiting him, and it's helped. If that means that there's more pressure on, I think, Bowie to step up, and Salo as well, and neither have been sort of as good as they've been in at different times during their career. Just looking at Trent Rivers, so that's good where, that's the numbers the vibe can often be wrong. His career average for metres gains is 309, so well and truly above that in this match. So maybe you should just stay on the ball.
Nairobi Demon asks, 2 good quarters, the first and the third, with an important game against the Lions on Friday. Is it possible the team were instructed to ease up on their effort to conserve energy in the last quarter? We were flat in that last quarter. Travi14 says, good to get back on the winners list, and I'm happy to see our old game style back. I don't care about the long bomb into the pocket. That was an extremely bruising and hard game of footy. The ruse really came to play. We are lacking class and polish, especially now without track, so I think we need to play these grinding games of footy. Do you think we faded out in the last quarter because of the way the game was played, or could it be that familiar trend that happens to teams after a bye? Also, what do you think this game could do in terms of impact on this week's game versus Brisbane? I was already worried, but now even more so after a tough physical game against the Roos. Magnus says, gents, as always, love the pod. Does anyone have stats on how we perform the second game after a bye? Example, this week's final quarter effort I put down to exhaustion. Really can't talk tonight, but interested how we have historically performed the following week. Plus, any view on how the club is training our youngsters. I was particularly excited to see the Colt in action for a full game. He got a bit tired at the end, but started really well. I feel the coaching staff are doing a good job in getting young players experience, probably more than other clubs. What is your view on this? And we'll talk more on that later. I have big hopes for the Dees at the Gabatoir. John Demonic says, my delusional positivity on that last quarter is that we won and we didn't expend any unnecessary energy to maintain a 30-point win or increase it to 60. Look around the comp. Every team is building a lead and then defending it. Noticing a hell of a lot of comebacks this year. How rare were they 5 years ago? This tells you just how much energy you expend to get a 5+ goal lead with the 2024 running game. You've got nothing left in the tank and the opposition can then chip away at it. Seems like every game bar the odd blowout. We play Brisbane on Friday, and maybe that fourth quarter against North will hold us in good stead to put in a more energetic performance and have something left in the tank come the last if we're still in the game. Well, geez, I hope we are still in the game on Friday by the last quarter. George, any thoughts on our last quarter fade out? Were we gassed, or did we take the foot off the pedal to conserve some much-needed energy, as some have suggested here, for our upcoming match against the Lions?
All I'd say is we must have saved a lot of energy in the Fremantle game, if that's the case. I don't know what's going on. I honestly do not know what's going on. This, like I said, this has been going on for at least the last 4 or 5 weeks. The way that we're playing, players looked gassed, completely gassed. It's not the same as previous years where around the bye time you take the opportunity to put miles into the player. This has been going on for a number of weeks, and at the end of the day, you're losing 4 out of 5 games. It's something that you can't afford to do in this competition when staying in the 8 or not is dependent on a win here or a percentage. As well as, which is going to kill us doubly towards the end of the season as it's standing at the moment. I honestly don't know what was going on in that last quarter. We simply had nothing going. We had nothing in the tank. The lack of run is the real telling thing for me. I think it was telling that Kyan Brown was able to perform that fantastic rundown because he came onto the ground. I played only 10 minutes. But nobody else looked like they were going to go do anything similar to that. Colt was another one who was just fantastic. I just love the way he plays. If you watch him standing on the mark, he tries to smother the ball every single time. He's always putting in. He was doing the same thing when he was playing at Casey. That's the sort of enthusiasm, that's the sort of get up and go that we need in the side, and it's just not evident in so many players, particularly in this game. So, yeah, it's very disappointing for what I've been seeing on the ground in the last month or so.
Yeah, I mean, just I guess to restate where I'm at is that we do this every year, and so I'll talk to that in a second. I have a theory, and I've said it from the beginning of the season, that I think that we're easing into this season. Goody keeps talking about it. I think they've adjusted their high performance program. George talked about that Age article about them training in blocks this year across the board. On top of that, there's two big factors, and one of the questions sort of touched on it, which is a really important point, is that we had 9 players who had 50 less games in this game. We're
going to talk about that soon, but yeah.
Yeah, and we basically, the demographic was almost identical to the Roos. So, we are running a very young team, and we're asking them to play, obviously a very demanding style. So there's that. There's also the other factor, which is a really significant one. We've got, Salo, who's had a limited preseason, who's been injured a couple of times and has been brought back in when certainly not cherry ripe. And the entire season we've had Petty and Clary, who are both clearly not yet at their optimal fitness. So that's 3 players out of a starting 22 who are not yet at AFL football. That's gonna have an impact. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, looking back at, and then there was the other stuff that George touched on, which is the time on ground, which Nico, a poster on Demonland, put up the following numbers. Viney had 38 minutes on the bench. Barrow had 34 minutes on the bench. The Colt, 35. Chandler, 32. Van Ruin, 40 minutes on the bench. McVie, 31. Howes, 40. Turner, 32. And Bowie, 35. What's his name? I checked. Viney was only on game time, so he's now on that list, 75%, 70% game time. And that's a part of the sort of management of the program. So that's another factor that's important. And that's partly, I think, the planning for next week. So I'm hoping that I'm right, obviously, that this is part of a program. They've got some significant challenges, choosing to basically get Petty and Clary fit, AFL fit, by playing AFL football, not back in the twos, which most teams would do. They obviously think that that's the best way to get them close to, as close as possible to optimal fitness come the end of the season. But what I wanted to sort of touch on, and maybe this is a point to play that clip, Andy, that this was from the pre-season preview that we did, and just so that, so I'm not being smart after the fact, but if you could play that clip now, Andy.
Some other predictions, Andy. There will be mid-season losses due to fatigue from games, from the cumulative impact of playing 10, 12, 13 games, and of course loading, causing Demonland to do its now annual meltdown. So that's one of my predictions.
That was your crappy microphone.
Yeah, so, whatever happens to our preseason predictions, that's one on the board for me. And so I did a bit of a deep dive into our struggles around the bye, and it's not just post-bye, it's in the 4 weeks around the bye, the 3 to 4 weeks before the bye and the week after the bye. So we have struggled pre and post bye since Burgess was made high performance manager. Not counting 21, because we didn't get a proper bye in 2020 because of COVID. If you remember, they retrospectively made the Essendon Melbourne game a bye. So 2021, post-bye, we could only manage 68 points in a scrappy 11-point win over very average Bombers side, and Demonland was, similarly, oh my God, we're terrible. In the lead up to the bye, we had 2 uncharacteristic defeats in our previous 4 matches. 2022 post-bye, we came out running on top of the ground, and in a shock result, we flogged the Lions by 62 points at the Gabba. I say a shock result because prior to the bye, we'd been in terrible form. We'd lost 3 on the trot, and the context for this is important. We had won our first 10 games of the season in 2022. We then lost 3 on the trot coming into the bye. Freo flogged us at the G by 38 points. The Swans also rolled us at the G, and I think we can, from memory, only scored 56 points or something, and we could only manage 56 points against a very average Pies team. They were near the bottom of the ladder that year, who won that game by 26 points. So that was in the lead up to the bye in 2022. 23 post-bye in a super scrappy match. You'll remember this because, again, Demonland was going into meltdown. We led the Cats by 7 points at three-quarter time in a really scrappy, ugly game. It was 6-11 to 5-10 at three-quarter time. So it was 7 points up. And, this is sounding like, a bit of a pattern one would thought, but we stopped to a walk in that game, just like we did against the Roos. We stopped to a walk in the last quarter, and we gave up 6 goals in that quarter to go down by 11 points down at the Cattery. In 2023, in our 4 pre-bye games, we lost to Port at Adelaide Oval, but we played really well in that game, but we lost. We lost again to Freo at the G. We had a scrappy win over the Blues, and it's important to remember at that point of the season they were 15th on the ladder, and a good win over the Pies in the lead up to the bye. 24, we've already had 2 byes, so after our first bye, we were woeful in the first half against the Tigers. Not much better in the second in that scrappy win over them. And after the second bye we just had, we again stopped to a walk, much like we did against the Cats in the last quarter, and we're lucky to hold off the lowly Roos, who I thought played much better than most people are giving them credit for. And our 3 pre-bye games this year, we played pretty well in our win over the Saints. We were totally woeful and clearly gassed against Freo, and better than the scoreline suggests against the Pies, but still very scrappy. And for context, it's important to note that in spite of, and arguably because of, those performances, we finished top 4 in 21, 22, 23. So, you can call that whatever you want to call that, but the pattern is clear. That's 4 seasons with almost an identical pattern of win and performances and losses around the bye period. Now, where we get to 25 and still be talking this 26, at some point, it's no longer a coincidence. And the other thing that I would note is it's not just us who are struggling. People. It's crazy. Maxi references this when he was interviewed in that ABC that I mentioned. We're not the only club having sort of crazy, funky, anomalous results, which Max points out without sort of nailing it. So, what were some of the results this weekend? Port got flogged. The Suns could only score under the, completely. So Lions flogged Port by 80 points at Adelaide Oval. I mean, come on.
That's because Port are awful.
But they don't get beaten.
They are awful, and they've got an awful coach.
Well, then why is it now that they've been beaten 80 points? They haven't previously been all season. If they're awful, they would be consistently beaten by 80 points. So at this point of the season, they got beaten by Brisbane at home by 80 points. Dogs flogged Freo by 70 points. They coming off a bye after flogging us. The Dogs flogged the Freo by 70 points. They got flogged by the Lions. The Dogs got flogged by the Lions the previous week. The Roos ran the Pies to a point after being 40 points up. The Suns could only manage 48 points after a few weeks ago kicking 160 points in the slippery conditions up in Darwin. They put 48 points under the Dockland roof. The Blues flogged the Cats. I mean, there's just so many crazy results every time at this point of the year, including for Melbourne. This is the 4th year it's happened, and it will continue to happen moving forward.
All right, let's move on. Buck Naked asks, was the fix in? How did you view the umpiring in the last quarter? I think that we got smashed around the ball and by the whistle in the last. Stephen May said in the interview to Channel 7 when they started getting all the downfield free kicks and 50s, it was going to be tough. Your thoughts on this? Pitmaster says, I know we're not supposed to worry about the umpires, but can you comment on how 2 decisions helped shape North's momentum in the final term? Both were triggered by Windsor's alleged infringements. The first was the bump that resulted in a downfield free and a goal to Zerha. That to me seemed extraordinary since Langdon was hit in the same fashion and almost identical timing on the opposite southern flank in the third quarter, and the ball, which had landed deep inside forward 50, was returned to almost to the wing for Langdon to retake his kick, thus robbing us of any advantage. The second was the 50-metre penalty for movement on the mark when Wood shaped a handball, which even the AFL website Match Report said was an incorrect decision, but the umpire was bluffed by Wood, who pointed it out. Wood was marched forward and allowed to crib around to lessen the angle and goal from close range. How much did those two decisions shape the course of the quarter? Was North going to gain the same momentum without those umpiring lapses? And I think there was also a 50-metre penalty awarded early in the game that was about 80 metres.
Was that two penalties?
No, I don't believe. If it would have been two, then it should have been further. It had to have been one.
I couldn't believe it.
It was not only one, but it was right in front of us, sort of in the at the half-back flank, and they've moved him to the centre of the ground. It was 80 metres.
To the forward 50.
It was a shot. It was a shot directly in front. So they didn't move the 50 metres straight ahead. They moved it as close to the centre as they could possibly go. It was just incredible. Yeah, just bizarre.
It was.
B-Man, your thoughts on the adjudication of the match, particularly some of those decisions in the last quarter?
Well, speaking of statistics, I thought during the game, God, we're getting robbed, and I kept on putting the freeze up on the board. It's like, oh, geez, we're about level. Absolutely, they were woeful, those decisions. I mean, we talk about this every season.
I think the downfield that North got was probably right, but I'm pitting it against the Langdon one because that also should have been downfield.
It depends which he hit him at. It was right below me, and sure, that was there, but it wasn't downfield. Certainly not if the Langdon one wasn't, but it was as he was hitting it.
They should have both been equal, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and the one that was right below me, that handball one, and it was so obvious. Like they literally brought in an interpretation.
That's the rule.
Yeah, and
you're not allowed to fake out. I mean, or you're allowed to fake out, but you can't penalise the guy on the mark for moving because of the fake out.
No, and it cost us a goal. And, I'm just over the umpiring, and I don't blame the umpires. I blame the AFL. And, we keep talking about this. They're talking about putting chips in footballs and the score review stuff, and just stop doing that and pay professional umpires. I mean, in terms of the influence on the game, they are a significant. Everyone says it's a really hard sport to umpire. Well, then make the rules clearer and pay them proper, and create a pathway, a career pathway. So 15-year-old kids who think, well, my AFL career is not going to pan out, but I want to umpire at AFL level. Young women, young men, and get the best decision makers, pay them good money to umpire the game properly, because too many times every week there are decisions that have significant ramifications for clubs. This is a $1 billion industry, and we've got hokey decisions like that one. As for the momentum, it definitely didn't help, and it was one of those situations, particularly if you accept that we were gassed. It looked like we were gassed. The Maxi interview that I put it up on Demonland, by the way, and it's on ABC, so it was on Sunday. It was a really, really good interview, the best interview. I thought it was fascinating, sort of his subtext of what he was saying. And he made an interesting point about momentum, which I think it gets lost in the mix a bit, is that he thought that the Roos obviously were attacking 40 points down. You throw caution to the wind. It didn't help that they got some easy frees that helped them with momentum. But what we didn't do that we're normally really good at in Goodwin's tenure is control the momentum and slow it down and chip it around. And Maxi, I thought that at the game. I thought, hold the ball for a while. Maxi said in this interview on ABC that the Roos attacked and we were looking to score too much in the last quarter, which I thought was really interesting, particularly because we didn't score. But, the other thing, just sort of quickly, I thought he was interesting that he said about how they came back. The question was how coming back. The Roos brought a couple of numbers to the stoppage late, he said, and that we probably didn't react quick enough to that strategy. I thought that was interesting as well. And again, it shows that how big a loss Track not being in the side is, because he allows Track's ability and his strength allows you to play one down, and they look to really exploit that one down by bringing an extra, which I didn't realise at the game. But yeah, I mean, I find it really difficult with the umpiring of the game. I'm fully wound up and emotional, and but they just got to. The AFL's got to do it better. And the other thing, just quickly, while I'm talking about umpires, and I said this at the time, the AFL should not make any changes in the middle of the season to rule changes. So a lot of people said, "Yeah, great, the new interpretation of the holding the ball." And two things I said to that is, what are the unintended consequences of that? And let's see how long it lasts. And I read somewhere this morning that this round was the lowest number of holding the balls paid for, I think, maybe all season, George, or something like that.
Yeah, since round 2.
Round 2. I mean, come on. And so many, and that's what drives you nuts. It looks like, I joked at the ground, it looks like every umpire who's umpired our game since the interpretation rule mustn't have got the memo. Because how many times were we not paid holding the ball when the opposition had time to get rid of it? It was so frustrating.
The good news has been that it's the same across every game. They've that new interpretation lasted 1 week. Across every game, they've reverted to the original. They're not prepared to make decisions and call it.
Exactly. And as you pointed out, George, that's what they're there for. The problem will be is that they'll get a rock at the umpires in 3 weeks, and out of the blue, there will be Friday night football. There will be 30. There will be 30 of them or something crazy. It just happens every year, and it really makes, to be honest, it makes the AFL look hokey competition from an elite world standard sort of perspective. The umpiring.
It was interesting on momentum. I think momentum also influences the umpires' calls. Not
the lack of it. Yeah. I've always felt that 30, 40 points down. What does it matter if we give, dodgy?
Yeah, I think there was also a third call. I'm not positive about this one, but I think it was the call against Tomlinson in a marking contest out in front, and then Ford took advantage and played on, but the call was originally made by the umpire who was out of zone. So there can't be. He
was in the centre square.
Yeah, so you can't.
Unbelievable.
You can't play advantage from an out of call zone, but they did, but again, it's just be consistent with the rules. Unfortunately, I think it was we were given the lowest of the low in the quality of the umpires for this game, and it showed.
Yeah, and the other big one was actually could have been critical. If we'd lost the game, this would have been a potential sort of factor in the loss, was not paying Petty that mark up forward. That was the rule is if you stop the ball, then that's a mark. And he clearly stopped the ball in its flight and didn't fumble. That was 100% a mark. And, I mean, he may not have kicked the goal, but it robbed us of a shot at goal, that's for sure.
Dominion says, finally, our own accuracy and our opponent's inaccuracy won us again. The only silver lining I can take from a win that felt like a loss. Shorty Short says, goal kicking. Obviously, we still have plenty of issues with the delivery inside 50. However, once we took marks and had shots on goal, our accuracy was much better. Question, did you notice a change in our goal-kicking techniques? It seemed like everyone had a slightly better technique this week and in some cases longer run-ups. Maybe Big Ben Brown has been coaching the forwards as he is nowhere to be seen anywhere else. Love the pod. Keep it up. George, did you notice anything different in regards to our goal-kicking technique this week? Or was it just law of averages?
Law of averages. We still only had 15 shots at goal. So there was nothing to shout home about. But I think it was, I don't know about the actual technique, but we got an awful lot of shots from inside a reasonable range because we took some good marks. Like Max is one, Petty got some good marks. JVR. You can always depend on JVR. So we didn't get the scoring opportunities from general play, which is where you score a lot more points. That was the real concern. But we've spoken enough about that. Let's see how we go against Brisbane next week.
There were after half time. It was from both teams 12 goals, no behinds after half time.
Was it 12 goals, no behinds? Right.
Yep.
Well, we won the game, as I said before. They won that game on expected score, and
by a lot.
Credit where it's due. And it was really interesting because I thought Turner, who really against the Pies, he really coughed one up. Looked like a pressure choke. He really looked to drive through the footy and kick hard through the ball, and I was really pleased that he nailed it. And as someone noted before, is players getting around Petty was a really positive sign, but it probably an indication too of, of stuff going on that we, as fans, we don't know about. And so the kicking was a deciding factor.
Singer says our forward line and entries into it are a dysfunctional mess. Is it because we have two backmen as key forwards, or is it time to bite the bullet and get an actual forward coach that understands leading patterns and how a forward line functions? I watch a lot of non-Dees footy each week and constantly see other teams hit up their key forwards lace out on leads. I can count on one hand the times I see Dees forwards hit up on a lead in the last 4 years. What replies, we could have Matthew Lloyd, Jason Dunstall and Tony Lockett as our forward coaches, and it would make no difference. Such is the poor quality of the ball coming inside 50. Skill and execution under pressure is the problem. Radish D adds, whatever the outcome of this season is, the footy department must find a solution to the forward line woes for the 2025 season. It was a problem in 2022, 2023 and part of the problem in 2024. It's the only significant long-term problem we have. I'm still bullish on the midfield in terms of talent and experience, and the team just can't continue to accept that. So, big man, are our woes inside 50 just a delivery or connection issue, or are there personnel and perhaps coaching issues present as well?
No, I think it's a bit of certainly we could do with another kick forward. We've really struggled. One of Goody's, preferences obviously is to have Talls up there. Benny Brown, I think would be in Goody's best 22 if he was fit because of the flexibility and the height and bringing it to the ground. JVR is he's a gun. It's going to help when Melksham comes back in. It's interesting in that urge people to listen to this interview with Gorney, because he seemed quite sort of honest and less of his sort of jokey vibe that he sometimes has. And he was asked almost exactly the same question, and he's basically said he's not concerned about our forward line. I think it's the delivery inside to our 50 that's our issue. Hitting up loose forwards, you need space to run into for a loose forward to run into, and that depends on your transition game working well, and ours hasn't been working well. So you create, your forwards like a Harry Mackay who can run into space can only do so when you win the ball on the halfback flank and move it quickly. That's what creates space up forward. And if you're not running on top of the ground, you're not spreading, and your transition game isn't top notch, then you're going to have less opportunity to kick to a leading forward. That's just is as it is. But without Billings, who came in for that kick inside 50 into the team, without Hunter, I think Windsor's struggling in the last 4 or 5 weeks. He hasn't hit many targets going inside 50. Colt, whilst he did a couple, he missed 2 or 3 really sort of very gettable hit-ups inside 50. Of course, everyone would love Harry Mackay and Curnow, wouldn't they? And but I think, our forward line isn't the issue. It's our sort of, and has been our issue, is our last kick inside 50.
Well, we could have had Curnow. We took Sam Wiedemann.
Don't remind us.
So on to confidence. Go Lordy says, I was at the G for the Collingwood and North games, and there was very little in either game to lift the spirits. We show no sign of team cohesion or understanding between the players. We rarely string more than 3 possessions together before turning the ball over, usually with a long bomb to a crowded static forward line. The poor field kicking and handballing breaks my heart with chance after chance being wasted by poor ball control. It's like most of the players, not just Clary, have lost their confidence. Given the way we are playing and the skills we are displaying, I fear that the North game might be our last win for the year. Where is the team that beat Port and the Crows in successive games and brought Geelong's 7-game streak to an end? Radish D adds that I love the discussion on mentality and psychology from the last episode. The negativity in our beloved football club is self-evident on the field. For example, the moment between Max and Maisie in the last quarter. But it's all over the place. The players look stressed and in their heads. I hope the club finds a way to change this, or I fear this season is going to be like 2020. Is part of the problem games at the MCG? This might sound like heresy, but the MFC SS is strong, and I have often felt in the last 5 years while watching the Dees at the G that when a Melbourne player makes a mistake, there is an audible groan from the crowd. this has to have an effect on the players. Was part of the massive success of 2021 the fact that all of the finals were played outside of Melbourne, where most of the supporters were not overburdened with MFCSS? I remember from Maxi's book that the mental changes in the off-season going into 2021 were fundamental to the success in his mind. Could the MFC faithful out there try and bite their tongues and see if anything improves? Or is the MFCSS too strong? Well, George, are we seeing a lack of confidence pervade the group, perhaps exacerbated by the collective veil of negativity of the supporter base? I've never heard that one before, but...
You should be answering this one, Andy, surely.
The difference is Andy goes. So he's not one of these supporters who sits at home and bags the MFC crowd.
I can assure everybody that every team that plays any sort of sports, when you do a turnover or a complete stuff-up of whatever it might be, the crowd will grow. And yes, you hear it from the Melbourne Football Club supporters, but you'll hear it from every other club supporters as well. But there is a lack of confidence that's going through the side at the moment. You've only got to compare the enthusiasm from the premiership year, and even before the premiership year, the enthusiasm that was within the group, the way they played, the way they backed each other up, that's disappeared. It's not the same feeling about the players. I don't know why. Maybe they're getting too old. It's starting to happen to Geelong in a big way, as I said it would earlier on in the year. They're not playing the same sort of style. You can see the enthusiasm that Collingwood has. Did I say that? I did, sorry. But you can see the way they're playing. That's enthusiasm. You can see the way Sydney are playing. You can see the way Carlton are playing as a team. And, of course, their supporters are up and yelling and screaming. Fantastic. But I'm not seeing the same team enthusiasm that we saw 3 years ago at this club. So, yeah, I've become very despondent about what I'm seeing at the moment.
El Diablo asks, how did you feel about the way Kynan Brown's debut was handled? I feel we are not doing justice to the father and son players. See Taj. It may explain why these kids sometimes have confidence issues even at VFL level. Must be very frustrating to be given such a small opportunity and then be dropped the next week. Lefty says, kudos to Kynan Doggy Brown for that rundown tackle. Love the desperation from a first gamer showing the rest of the boys how it's done. B-Man, what did you think of Doggy Brown Jr.'s game, as well as how his debut was handled, and perhaps how we've handled the game time or lack thereof of some of the young players and subs who have sometimes been given a few minutes here and there and then shuttled back to...
I don't know. Like I said, there were 10 games, 9 players in that match for Melbourne who played less than 50 games, and Bowie he's only played 53. We've got a very young team, and so it's no wonder in some respects that we're struggling at the moment with forgetting forgetting the high performance program, just how tough AFL footy is. I don't have an issue with Kynan Brown being used as a sub. It's like. People say people would knock Melbourne for not being professional or whatever. It's it's not a local footy club. If that's the best way to use him, and he gets a game,
other clubs do it too. We're not the only player to play your first gamer as a sub. And
yeah, I mean, I get it that it's disappointing for the fans and his friends and family for sure. Speaking of which, didn't you love the footage of Dees and his dad up there in the stand? And I just love that. That's a good thing about footy, isn't it?
There was footage of his mates afterwards coming into the rooms and he was hugging them. And
yeah, exactly. So I didn't really have a sort of, I wasn't down on that. A few thoughts about Kynan is that it occurred to me the same thing as I thought when I saw him at the beginning of the season in that Blues game. He's skinny, isn't he? He's a little kid. I mean, he's not a kid, but, he's quite a slight young man. The other thing about him coming on is that arguably we don't win that game if he isn't used as a sub and has got run in his legs to run Larky down. So, that was a huge factor. Wowie, to be honest, to fair to Woe, he's had his crack, and same with Laurie. I would say the same with Laurie, is that they both had their chance to cement their position in this side and didn't take it. I think that we've done a great job over the last few years bringing in younger players, giving them their opportunities. The other thing I'd say about Connor Brown is that if they would have talked to him about all of that, they would have said, this is how we're going to use you. And, he's going to say, yeah, put me on as a sub. I'm happy to play, So I had no issue with any of that. And I love the fact that he was a critical factor in our win. Again, sort of referencing that Maxi quote, he joked that it got the most super coach points for, compared to possessions in the history of football. So he had a rundown tackle, pressure act. Maxi went through them. A effective kick, a free kick, all from that one action.
It's there's nothing unusual about the way that he's handled in this game. Every coach in every team doesn't want to use the sub in the event that they have an injury at some point. So they tend to leave them till the last quarter, of course. And also in this game, it was tight in the end. Who are you going to take off? You're going to put on a brand new kid. Things are getting tighter and tighter. It takes a while to get subs on and off in any case. You can't afford to, maybe we should have taken a Fritsch off or someone like that. But can you afford to do that when you're 2 goals down, 3 goals down? It's a hard call.
Funnily enough, I think that was a factor, George, because he was sitting below where I was. I was sitting above where he was on the interchange bench, and he took his jumper off like his gear. He's looked ready to come on 3 or 4, maybe more, 5 or 6 minutes before he actually did. And I wonder whether it was those 2 early goals from the Roos that Goody thought, hold on, we might just wait a little while before we bring Cup on.
Bigfoot says, I have grave concerns about the efforts of Bailey Fritsch. He goes missing for large chunks of games, plays behind his man, doesn't chase, isn't providing a target. He's not the only culprit. And we've got our good mate Salty weighing in. He's got a few other points, but main point is about Fritchie.
Hey boys, Salty here. Quite a game to be at and witness. I can't help but think that sometimes a win like that and the other results this week will sort of gloss over what was a pretty poor performance. If it's not for Port Adelaide and Geelong, I think we probably get a lot more heat than what we will this week. I don't know if I'm a sadist, but obviously I feel I was somewhat cheering for North to win and us to lose to sort of highlight where we're sort of really heading in the wrong direction. I definitely think Clayton Oliver is just grossly unfit. I think that's what's happened with him. He's just unfit. He's getting to the contest and just not looking at it. But another one is really I want to point out is Bailey Fritsch. 0 tackles. Just didn't look like he's even in it. And those two guys are both senior members of our team and expected leaders in their positions, and they're just not really lacking discipline, lacking effort, and that's just certainly is a psychological component to how we're playing. And I still think the probably season's cooked, even though we won that game. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was over 39.5 against Brisbane. Anyway, I'm looking forward to your positivity. I know that I am a sadist, and I have a large amount of Melbourne Demons SS. Cheer me up as always.
I think he's gone from salty to sour.
I reckon salty's definitely in the majority, so there's no doubt about that.
And we'll talk about Clary in a minute, but George, do you have any concerns on Bailey Fritsch's form?
I've got concerns about Salty. He's calling himself a sadist. A pessimist is perhaps, a sadist. We've got a certain group of Demonlanders who apparently engage in those sort of activities. So maybe Salty should give them a call. I'm sure they'd be willing to take him and show him a few things up at the Sunbury Manor. Really disappointed in Fritsch's performance. What really struck me was playing behind all the time. It was you're a leading forward. You should be out there presenting. We talked about ball movement into the forward line, but you've got to present every now and again. And he certainly didn't present in any way, shape, or form. And as we talked about again before, if you're playing a bad game, everybody plays a bad game of any sport at some stage. But at least in footy, you can tackle someone, you can try, you can chase, but didn't see any evidence of that with Bailey. So, yeah, a very disappointing performance. And quite frankly, the only thing I think that'll keep him in the side this week is we have no one else down at Casey.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You can't really. I don't know what you do with him, because I don't think you can drop him, particularly in with our forward line woes. Because we know what he can do. He can turn it on, but it's a tough one. Ben?
Yeah, I mean, it was a terrible game by him. And I'm just hoping something was up with him in, who knows, maybe, I don't know, maybe he was carrying something, maybe he was crook, maybe he couldn't deal with the training. I don't know, but maybe then, in which case they shouldn't have picked him because, his body language was pretty average too, I thought. There were a couple of, efforts, in particular one, which is like one of my pet hates in footy. And Melbourne used to do it, in our periods when we're really down, you saw this quite often, but it was in the defensive, not even in the forward line, where someone passed to him and he did he broke the golden rule. He didn't move towards the ball and waited for it. And he was lucky that the defenders saved his bacon, because it was a lazy effort, I thought. Doesn't matter what's going on, is that you make sure you mark that. It was 40 metres out directly in front of the opposition's goal. The other thing I thought, George, was that he's so good one-on-one normally. That's his strength. He's pound for pound, I reckon, the best one-on-one mark in the AFL when he's up and about. But there were 3 occasions where I thought the kick was excellent, weighted to his advantage, and he just couldn't move the player under the ball the way he normally can. So, we can't. I mean, Petty's been knocked from pillar to post for the last few weeks. He had a much better game this week than Fritter, and you're carrying, that's 3 players if you sort of who are not contributing a huge amount. Well, I mean, I thought Petty had actually his best game for a while, and we'll talk about Clary in a sec. So, but 3 players not running over the ground that well for sure.
Jano2 says, I'm probably going out on a limb here, but I'm not enjoying the hate re Clary. I see a young man trying to make amends who has not had a preseason and is trying his guts out week in, week out. What would dropping him and sending him back to Casey achieve? He gets heavily tagged each week and doesn't seem to get a fair run from the umpires, unlike others who seem to be in the untouchable category. What does the panel think? Am I on my own here? El Diablo 14 responds, he is far from his best. It's almost as if he was abducted by aliens last year around June, and the Clary we have today is a bad clone or something. Can't believe the quick decline from just 12 months. Really, it's hard to know what's best to do with him. I think the real Clary is still somewhere inside him, but how do we make it flourish again? Garbo says, really disappointed that Oliver not only failed to step up without track there, but had one of the worst games I've ever seen from him. He's clearly not improving as the year goes on, and if anything, he's dropping off more the deeper we get into the season. Is it time to drop him to the seconds or just rest him until such time as he's able to contribute at a required level? This can't be good for both his confidence or the team morale to know we have a player who is getting a free pass. JJ Rogan says, not to pile on Oliver, but how ridiculous was his clearance kick from half-back when he didn't even bother looking up the field when he was clear. Goodwin and Max talk about learnings. Give it a spell, I reckon. It's not that hard to learn to have a look. Happening for years now. I get that he's frustrated, but he's meant to be a senior player of the club. Goodwin has to take some blame. Every person watching could see Oliver being upset. Why not change it up, play him out of the goal square for 5 minutes? Maybe he kicks a goal and gets some confidence. Our midfield and structure isn't some sort of Jenga tower that's going to collapse if players are moved around, but he acts like it is. 58er replies, absolutely let Oliver get positive in the forward line and feel good about himself, 1 out even. Goody has to throw the directions imaginatively, and unless he does that, there is no way we'll make the top 8. We have to be aggressive to win and improve percentage as much as possible. Lazy adds, Oliver had an interrupted preseason, but people are still claiming that he's underdone after 14 games doesn't gel. The guy used to be untaggable, and even when he sat someone on him, he'd have 25 touches. Now all of a sudden, he's getting a hard tag and looks human. I know he's been through a lot, but if I was told in January that despite playing every game to this point, we weren't going to have someone even close to the Clary of old and it would be a major quarter slump, I wouldn't be too excited. Wells11 says, "Hi guys, thanks always for the pod. Demonland is fraying at the seams, but you three are still having balanced, intelligent conversations. A lot of talk now about Oliver. What strikes me most about him is that he's lost his breakaway pace. He was never a great kick, but he had developed that burst of speed, and it's now almost nowhere to be seen. Could it be that his hamstring is so damaged that burst of speed is impossible, or do you think he is still just too fatigued and it's a fitness issue? He's being tagged after all. I'm just struggling to see even 50% of the player we all loved. Do you think he can come back to an even close to the player he was in 2024 or 2025? Demonic Final Fantasy says, devil's advocate and left field thinking, but would using Clary as a sub help him and the team so long as he understands and is on board with the why? An eager Clary released at halftime might just give him the opportunity to be fresh enough to impact heavily and gain his confidence. The risk is robbing Peter to pay Paul, no doubt. B-Man, what to do about Clary?
Lot in that one, and what to do about Clary. I think, again, I keep coming back to perspective. I mean, I think people, I get it. I'm a passionate fan as well, and I just think people need sort of a bit of perspective in terms of Clary. So for one thing, he is far better than any option that we've got at Casey who could come into our midfield. Like, I mean, please, come on. Like, who else could, honestly, Laurie's had his chance. Laurie had his chance to be a midfielder. Would anyone seriously, across the AFL even, forgetting sort of Melbourne fans who are losing their objectivity or can't think through that lens, does anyone think that Laurie is a better option, from any other club than Oliver? Who else is there? AMW could come in, but he's not a midfielder. So really the only midfielder who's played any AFL football who could come in is Laurie, and he's not replacing Oliver. So there's that. The second thing is, as George has noted, it's a truism of footy. Your pre-season sets up your whole season. He had more than an interrupted pre-season, so he had all of his challenges and probably literally only did a half a season, even though he's been working super hard. But as I said before, they're clearly making a decision to get him up to close to his optimal fitness by playing him in the ones. And he's going to, much better than kicking the Jew down at Casey. So it's a much better option. The plan is longer term for us, to, just like all of Goody's plans, is to be playing our best football in August and September. Goody has said it from the beginning of the season. He keeps on saying it. And I don't think it's reasonable just to discount what Goody's saying just because we're in poor form at the moment. So there's that. Then the other factor is just on a perspective. So just on that point, I reckon definitely that's one of the things he's lost is that breakaway pace, that getting out the front of packs. Another thing that, again, this is Maxie's. He was asked about Clary, so very basically similar questions to what some of those points there. He was asked in this interview on ABC, and he made the following point about Clary is, and again, this is an important bit of perspective, I think, for fans, that Clayton has been playing a defensive midfield role this season, and this is his quote, Max's quote. People don't see that. Fans don't see that, but he's been playing a completely different role, which frees up other mids to be more attacking and explains his drops in possessions, right? And he then talked about this game. He was actually freed up in this game to play a more attacking role, but got tagged. And I don't think handled it particularly well. I agree.
Gave a lot of undisciplined free kicks as well.
Yeah, and I agree with the comment that I said at the game is that Goody should have taken him off at one point. Just put him on the bench, put him down, relax, speak to him for a while. Goody likes to sort of, I think one of his philosophies is people to play through stuff. So it probably wasn't such a bad thing for him to get tagged. But Maxie's point was, for the whole season, he's been playing as a defensive mid. And that's allowed other players to be more attacking. And in this game, he was freed up to be more attacking but got tagged. And so he responded by, and he talked about the tagging. Maxie said that he thought he handled it okay after the first 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, not great, but okay. But he made the point that Clary tried to, whenever possible, get to Davis Uniacke. Which freed up Jack to play his game. And Jack Viney had his best game since probably round 2 or 3. So the two are connected. Maxi also said on Clary that he's working super hard and hopefully will, quote unquote, get back to his best in the next few weeks. And as I said, that's what they're clearly planning to do. Petty's looking like he's running over the ground better. He's jumping. We're seeing some benefit of it. I think we will with Clary as well. And just on perspective, just looking at, forgetting this, who's going to replace him at midfield, because that makes it sound like, some of those comments make it sound like we're carrying him. So just look at some of the numbers. So this is contested possessions for minimum 10 games for midfielders, average across the AFL, right? So contested possessions is a good number for a midfielder. It's a good sort of metric. So this is midfielders who have played a minimum 10 games this year for average. He's 18th in the AFL, averaging 11.07 contested possessions, ahead of players like Jai Newcomb that everyone seems to love, Jason Horne-Francis, George Hewitt, Ollie Wines, Noah Anderson, James Warple, Petrarca, Dunkley, Kelly, Rowbottom, Fife, Jack Viney, Andrew Brayshaw, and on it goes. For disposals generally, just in total disposals for the same minimum 5 games for mids. I'm not sure why I put minimum 5 games, make it minimum 10. Where is he on the list? So he is 35th, so further down, but keeping in mind what I said about the fact that Maxi said he's playing a defensive role this season, so his numbers are down because of that factor. But still, so he's the 35th midfielder for total disposals, ahead of everyone's darling Chad Warner, Matt Rao, Christian Petrarca, Tim Kelly, Jai Newcomb, Elliot Yeo, Connor Rosie, Blake Acres, Oliver Wines, and on and on and on. And I could go on to then the other one for goal assists. So this one was a real surprise, minimum 10 games. Again, for midfielders, he's equal 17th in the AFL for goal assists. He's averaging 0.79. Breaks my heart to see who number 1 is. You can probably guess who that is. It's Track. But he's 17th, equal 17th of midfielders who have played minimum 10 games in the AFL, ahead of Jack Viney, ahead of Travis Boak, ahead of Scott Pendlebury, ahead of Zach Butters, Hewitt, Rayner, Rao, Treloar, Shea Bolton, and on it goes. So, and then just in the player ratings, even in this game, he's averaging 13 for this season. So in this game, he got 13 play points. He was ahead of, 13. Let's start again. He's player rating for this match, which is a really good indicator of a game. 6.8 was his player. So it wasn't a great game by, I'm not saying it was a fantastic game, but it was ahead of Jake Bowie, Harrison Petty, Ed Langdon, Blake Howes, the Colt, Kynan Brown, obviously, Caleb Windsor. So, he was far from our least effective player. So I just think perspective is important. The guy's not going to get dropped, and nor should he. I mean, to talk about him getting dropped is just ridiculous, really.
I can only back that up. I think people are just starting to realise how thin our list is. This is really shone a light on it. It's Bailey Laurie or no one at Casey at the moment. You'd willingly have Mitch White, who's not on our list, who we did listed a couple of seasons ago as our next best midfielder based on the Casey performance. We don't have anybody at Casey who can come up and certainly replace a Petrarca, but least of all take out Oliver as well.
And then George too, we lost Gus at the beginning. So our starting midfield last year was Gus, Clary, and Track. Yep. Track is at half rat power, but still, as I just indicated, is well up there as a midfielder in the AFL. And of course, we've lost Track for the season. So it's very thin at Casey. The other thing that really disappointed me, there was 2 things that disappointed me about this game. Firstly, Phillips, who was tagging him, wasn't penalised, or was penalised once, I think, in the whole game. He was holding him. Absolutely. Shocking. And we talked about the umpires. That was just utterly ridiculous that more penalties weren't applied to that. Phillips did a great job. I mean, he shut down Nick Dacos the previous week. He held him to 19 possessions to 3/4 time. Then Clarkson completely stuffed it up by taking him off the ground. Dacos basically won that game for them as a result because he was let loose all of a sudden. So don't discount how great a job Phillips was doing on it. But the other thing was, in terms of coaching,
Clarkson did a great job. Go and shut down Oliver because they haven't got Petrarca. Who does that leave? Jack Viney. That's basically it in the midfield of the prime movers. But our coaches, I'm not blaming Goody again. This is the guys upstairs. I only saw Jack Viney was the only one who provided blocks for Oliver. It was going on the whole game. You need to block the tagger out so that you can release Oliver. It's not surprising he only got 14 possessions or whatever. It's because he never had a free run at the ball. You've got to block to provide. Look at the job that players like Cripps and Walsh and at Carlton do, blocking each other to release the good player. Losing Petrarca is going to be enormous, and other coaches are going to do exactly the same thing. You've got the prime mover is Clayton Oliver. You'll send a tagger to him. That shuts down Melbourne's midfield. It leaves you with Jack Viney, who played a fantastic game. But you need to be able to tell the other guys who are in there, you've got to work as well, not just chase the ball. You've got to protect Oliver to release him because he's more effective than what you will be.
Yeah, I reckon that's a really good point, George. And also to help him out frustrating-wise, I mean, he must have really in his first couple of seasons been a real lip because the umpires just hate him. I don't like that diving, and I think he's got to get that out of his game. I didn't like that at all. But you could see how frustrated he was getting. I think he did a really good job, George, to not get to lose his lolly because I watched it really closely and Phillips was scragging him like a banana, like the whole game. And I don't think I've ever, in fact, I'm sure I've never seen Max so furious. Did you see the way he was chasing after Phillips and verbally?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what went on. And then that was before the big melee that happened at halftime, but he was relentlessly going after him verbally.
Yeah, he bumped, he sort of blindsided bumped Max. So Max was like, mate, don't try and do that to me.
Yeah, I really agree with that, though. I would have loved to have seen his teammates sort of get around him a little bit more. I would have liked to see Goody take him off at one point and just give him a rest. But you mentioned Sam Walsh. No one is talking about Sam Walsh being dropped, are they? So ironically, I had these two players to compare. So Sam Walsh for this season, this is averages this season. The player rating for Sam Walsh this season is 14.47. Clayton's 11.62. Sammy Walsh has played 10 games. Clayton Oliver's played 14. Both time on ground is almost identical, 78 to 77. Disposals, Sam Walsh has got him 30 to 24. Metres gained is 452 to 329. Contested possessions is 12 to 11. Clearances are 2.2 to 1.9. For average clearances per game. Marks 2.4 to 2.8. Goal average is 0.3 to 0.1. They're basically very similar numbers. Pressure acts 23 to 45. So, no one's talking about Sam Walsh, not being in great form, but they're very comparable numbers to Clary's. So, again, it's that perspective issue. He's not playing how he was, as good as he was at his best, but he's still playing pretty good footy. Certainly our best midfielder this season, no doubt about it.
Oh, my Dees says, we had something like 9 players 22 and under on the ground for the North game. This, to me, highlights that we're already future-focused and trying to develop our list. Yes, we haven't got much depth right now, being hit by injuries, but I feel like we are doing what we can and asking a lot of young players to step up into challenging roles. I'm bullish about the future with Rivers, Van Rooyen, McVie, Bowie, Tolstrup, Howes, Brown, Windsor, Woden and Turner, to name a few. They all have a huge amount of improvement yet in them in the years to come. Was really happy with the win given the past few weeks. I'm very much hoping for a Bim Man special funky result against the Lions. Go Lordy says, hello gents, I love the podcast even when we lose. There is usually something positive to take away from any game, and Bim Man George always finds something to cheer us up and reduce Andy's MFCSS. I agree with many here who think the North Melbourne the game felt like a loss. To be held scoreless in the fourth quarter after a dominant third quarter is hard to accept when playing the bottom team. I suspect it has a lot to do with the number of younger players in the team at the moment and the fact that they are getting tired at this stage of the season. To have Toby Bedford, James Jordan and Harmsy back in the team, and Grundy. Given these trading decisions and the constant changes in player positions across the field this year, do you think there is any chance the Melbourne Football Club might be in danger of being fined for tanking? At least we could afford to pay the fine this time around. Keep up the good work, chaps. Lazy says, why aren't we rewarding players that show obvious ticker? In the dying minutes, A&B, Smother and Brown's tackle were characteristic of these players. Why do we persist not rewarding someone like Tajua Woden, who always displays these traits as well? D-Spirit says it's flying under the radar, but other D's completing a mini rebuild. Obviously, losing Harms, Jordan Bedford was not great, but was it a deliberate strategy to inject youth into the team? Maybe D's are foregoing immediate wins for a longer-term sustainable list. Players under 22 this week: Bowie 21, McVie 20, Windsor 19, Tolstrup 18, Van Rooyen 21, House 21, Turner 22, Brown 19. That is a quarter of the team. In fact, I think I am right in saying we had more under 22s than North Melbourne. Maybe we need to be more realistic in our expectations and things are not as bleak as they seem. I think the worry is that our Granite, Gorney and Maisie don't have a lot left. Buck Naked says, so on the weekend we had the most players under 22, 10. We are without Track, Angus and Lever and Smith, and Oliver was way down. I'm not sure what the expectation is, but we are not doing too badly given this and a number of other players that are down on form. I saw 3/4 of something pretty good. And we've got a voicemail from Roadstar.
Hey guys, Roadstar here again. After, a real hard stopper in the end, wasn't it really? I think we showed some good signs, some improvement. And I'm not trying to be goody here and say we're going to take learnings out of this and whatever, but I think there was some improvement there. And yes, it's North, but gee, they're on a bit of a tear at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how they go in their last 9 matches. Either that or that's a real sign of where we're at, so time will tell. So I think, there was a few standouts, probably still not enough even effort over the ball. And, obviously consistency still a huge issue. To not score in the last and let them put on 5 straight, kick the last 6 in the game and almost top it up really. And, what a great game-saving tackle by the first gamer, Kynan. So the young pup of Dogger, which was great. So, I guess that's the question. And what's causing this inconsistency is it just, the cattle we've got on the park, and we do have a lot of young kids. So hard to tell exactly how they're going to perform week in, week out. And when your leaders like Larry sort of doing what he's doing and giving away stupid frees and whatever. I guess the worry was we couldn't stop that roll once North got on it. We didn't even look like scoring in the last quarter. But look, I think we take the win. The big test is next week. I think we just needed a win. The boys needed to feel it, sing the song. They didn't sing with any gusto. I think they knew they were lucky. But I think we move it. We take it. We move on to next week, which is the real test, isn't it? Brisbane are on an absolute roll. So we'll see how we go then. Anyway, thanks, boys. Really appreciate the pod again. Thanks, lads.
Thanks, Roadstar. I saw a post on Twitter by a Dees fan, Footy Degenerate, as he's called, that made a list of the amount of players under 22 that each team in round 15 had, and that wasn't including the teams that had the bye. Geelong had 4 under 22. Carlton, Sydney, Brisbane, Essendon and West Coast had 5 under 22. GWS, Port and Freo 7. North had 8. The Suns 9. And the Dees topped the list of 10 players under 22. That's a lot of inexperience in the team. So, George, what does that tell you? I think we've answered that question already tonight.
I see it probably very differently. I think we've got real concerns. It's all very well having 10 under 22s. It's the quality of those 10. Mainly those 10 are in there because we have no other options. Mm-hmm. You've only got to look at what's down at Casey at the moment. And quite honestly, there was no one at Casey who played this week would be pushing for a senior spot. They've brought in AMW, who's probably going to replace Kynan Brown. I don't want
He might replace Salem if he's injured.
Sorry?
If Salem's injured, he might be replacing him.
Might be a replacement for that. But honestly, there's no one down at Casey. The really real concern is, of those 10, who's going to replace Max, Track, Oliver, May, T-Mac, Viney in the coming years? And I go back to the 2021 premiership and what we've lost. We've lost more than what we've put onto the side in the last 3 years. Out of that premiership side, McVee's probably plays Hibbert, which was great. JVR's replaced Ben Brown. No one's replaced Angus Brayshaw. No one's replaced Luke Jackson. But more importantly, the ones who didn't play in that finals team, let's run through the list. Nathan Jones, James Jordan, Vandenberg, Nev Jetta, Smith, Melcham, Bedford. Those guys all would have got a game, given injuries and things like that in that premiership side. I can't see anyone in the Casey side who's going to come in at the moment to replace people who, and they only get a run because there's an injury. They're not getting into the side because they're any good.
Ben?
I reckon I take all those points. And Gus is you can't really count Gus because we lost him at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
But I think you're underestimating the talent in that group of players under 22. JVR, I think, is the best young forward in the game.
Yeah, he's replaced Ben Brown.
Well, it's not about replacing. I mean, that's
we have to replace him.
That's a false sort of equivalence. Like, what does that mean? Replacing all teams list the thing.
They're replacing. That's the level you've got to replace.
Well, JVR is a better player than Ben Brown. So to win
a premiership,
JVR is going to be a star, a total star. Ben Brown's never going to be a star. We got him as a 28-year-old croc from North Melbourne. Let's not overrate the pudding on Benny Brown. JVR is going to be.
If we win a premiership, if we want to win a premiership, we need a JVR to kick 3 goals.
JVR is going to be better than Jackson.
The point is, to win a premiership, that's what you have to have. We haven't replaced all those players.
Well, as I said, I think you're underestimating. I mean, Caleb Windsor, Judd McVee, Jake Bowie.
Bowie played.
Sorry?
McVee replaced Hibbert.
Yeah, but they're replacing better player. Well, that's right. McVee will be a better player than Hibbert if you want to go there, for sure. McVee is a more talented player than Hibbert.
It's about the team. We've lost at least 2 players, really senior players, and we have no backups.
Well, of course, that's what happens when you lose senior players. I mean,
to win a premiership, you have to have the backups and the senior players. We haven't got them.
Well, I mean, all teams lists are thin. Like, it's just as you said about Collingwood. They lost their 4 of their first 5 games because on the back of their injuries. If Swans suddenly lose 4 or 5 of their best players, they're not going to win the flag either. So Gus, you can't. Gus was something out of the blue. We lost him before and didn't have the opportunity to replace him. So when you look at the quality of those players under 22, that's a pretty impressive list of young players. That's I don't know about this replacing sort of stuff because you don't play in 21. In 24, you play what's in front of us. So.
And all I'm saying is what we've got in front of us is not very good, and it's not a premiership side.
Well,
I agree.
I mean, potentially not when you're losing the best player in the game in track out of the game. You take Dacos, Nick Dacos out of Collingwood, and you could say the same thing. But
we took Nick Dacos out of the game and still lost. Collingwood had half their bloody team out. They had half their midfield out. They had half their forward line out, and they still pantsed us. I don't know. We kicked inaccurately, but that even not a true reflection of the way we played. All right, let's move on. We're going to walk in circles with that. Ruck rules. Wells 11 says, interesting to hear Gawn's post-game talk about the new ruck rules have changed the craft. There's a lot more body use at centre bounces and it's changed how the centre bounce clearances are playing out. Gawn said he was late to the party in understanding this. So do you think it's possible that our whole centre bounce setup hadn't yet adjusted? For example, we can look a whole lot better than we have been if we now adjust. But also, who the F is the coach looking at such things? Well, the ruck coach, I reckon, is a little busy with the forward line right now. It's a type, your call's important to us. Please hold the line, and our ruck coach will be with you shortly once he sorts out the forward line mess. So almost every centre bounce, Bin Man, whether Max was involved in with Sherry this week was a wrestle. It was like an arm wrestle, and I can't recall seeing this as much as I did on Saturday night. What are your thoughts regarding that? Did you recall this year? But usually you have the 2 guys sort of, at either end of the circle running at each other or at least near each other and jumping for the ball. This was an arm wrestle at like a ball, like a throw-in type of wrestle at every centre bounce. I've never seen that before. And I know that's the new rule, but yeah.
File is under unintended consequences. At least this rule was done in the off season. At least this rule change was done in the off season. Remember, we talked about it. Maxi talked about it at the beginning of the season. The thought was that it was going to advantage Maxi. But so have I seen it before? Yeah, multiple times. And it started with
for the whole
Brody
game?
Grundy in opening round.
That
right from the get-go, he showed every other ruck how to dismantle or to negate, which is to back
he did
into
it a bit he did it a bit differently. He sort of went into him. This started from the bounce down.
Same
as
principle though, crossing the line immediately and getting into him.
They were bear hugging each other almost from the beginning in wrestling.
I
haven't seen
basically
that.
who's the Roos ruckman again?
Sherry or Jerry. I don't know.
Basically, all he was trying to do is negate Max, and we really want to see that. The ball up is supposed to be the only neutral time. Everyone's in their 6-6-6. You've got 4 players in the middle. It's supposed to be a clean opportunity, and he's getting wrestled, and he was getting really frustrated as well. I think it's just leaving aside. I just think Maxi's treated terribly by the umpires week in, week out. It's another one who gets scragged, but it's just a rubbish. Leaving aside that aspect of it, it's a rubbish look for the game. I mean, that's why it's weird, because that's why they brought in the centre circle with a line across the centre circle to have 2 ruckmen run at each other to stop the wrestling of like Crackers Keenan used to do. That's how it looked. Remember Crackers Keenan? He was not really a ruckman, more of a, he was short, but he basically wrestled, and they brought that line in to stop that sort of wrestling at the centre bounce, and that's all we saw on the weekend. I thought it was just ridiculous. As possibly we haven't responded to it. I don't know. I mean, clearly, if I was coaching against Melbourne, I would do everything in my power to negate Max Gawn, and if you can get away with it, all the good. But the AFL, did they properly think through this before? Did they trial it at a lower level? Did they trial it in the AFLW? Was it in the AMOs? I don't know. Was it in Waffle, VFL, this rule change, or did they just have a sort of hangover one morning and decide we're going to bring in this rule and see how we go? We'll roll it out and maybe we'll change it halfway through the season, or we'll do a new interpretation, or, and we'll see where we go, because at the moment, it's taking away one of our best strengths in Maxi. As I said, ironically, the thought was at the beginning of the season that it would advantage Max, and it hasn't.
Buckneckett says, it's a long season and we don't have the cattle at the moment to be there at the pointy end. If we can keep doing above average and make the 8, which I believe we will do, then I will mark it a pass for 2024. Where are your pass marks for this year based on where we are at compared to the start of the year? Com responds with, I'll second this as a topic for discussion. Nathan Jones said it a few weeks ago, and we all need to reassess our expectation of Melbourne. On the weekend, we were without Track, Gus and Lever. From a purely leadership perspective, that is massive. On top of that, we have Oliver really struggling and several players out of form and low in confidence. The post-game thread on Deemerland went into meltdown even though we won. There will be a time when we will wish we will see the likes of Max, Viney, Clary and Maisie running around the G1 last time. If we reset our expectation, it might allow us to enjoy wins like we just had. Love the podcast, lads. Keep up the great work. So, guys, have you adjusted your expectations of where we are at and where we are likely to finish this season? I'll start with you, George.
I think I said last week we might make the 8. We won't make top 4. I think we'll be lucky to make the 8 at the moment, given the remaining games that we've got. We've got the hardest draw of any club, I think, when they've done the analysis of who's in and out of the 8 currently, and it's really tight in the 8 this year. Sydney and Carlton, they're fine. Sydney's so far ahead of everybody else, but there's an awful lot of teams from 3 downwards to who are very close to each other, and we're playing an awful lot of. We're playing 5 of them, and the 2 sides outside close to us as well, the Brisbane and Gold Coast, and we play both of them. So
and West Coast too, who touched us up a few weeks ago.
But really, our draw is looking awful. The number of players that we've got to be able to select from, we bring back Lever. That's it. There's no one else to improve our side
except Melksham.
Melk will be lucky to get on the field.
You're kidding. Right,
No, I'm not.
Go on,
I'm not.
George. Why do you think you'll be lucky to get on the field? He looked fit at the beginning of the season. He looked fitter than Petty, even with his knee.
Well, he hasn't played for the whole of this season for that very reason. You've got to wait for the 12 months at least. He's not there yet.
Well, they're saying 1 to 2 weeks.
Next week.
Well, 1 to 2 weeks. He's
1 to 2 weeks with the chance I read this morning of playing next week.
Yeah.
So,
but he's not going to make the difference. He's not going to improve us to get to anywhere near competitive stage.
Well, that wasn't the point. You said that it was that we haven't got anyone coming back in. We've got Lever and Melksham, who were in our best 23 for most of last year. So
I think the pearl is coming out of George. Big man.
I can feel it. I have adjusted my expectations in large part because of track going down. Like I said, if you took Goulden out of the Swans, if you took, who's the best player at the Blues, Walsh out of the Blues, maybe not Walsh, maybe if you took Cripps out of the Blues, if you took, did I say Nick Dacos? If you took Nick Dacos out of Collingwood, if you took, out of the Lions, you took, I don't even know who Lions' best player, Lachie Neale out of the Lions, and
you'll know it on Friday night.
Struggle. So absolutely, the problem is just from winning the flags perspective. As I've said, the critical. I put the curse on us with 6-2. We're a lock for top four because history shows that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to win from the flag from outside the top four. So it's going to be very difficult, but not impossible for us to make the top four, because the reality is you can feed into your feelings about how we are, but the reality is we're 4 points away from fourth. That's just a fact. That's not like me being overly optimistic. That's just a real fact. So we can apply whatever we want going forward. My own view, where my expectations are, is I don't think we'll make top four. Percentage is a real worry. That's been a big concern. We were 120 3 weeks ago. We've dropped down to 100. That's going to be as big a factor as any. Like I said, my expectation has been all season that it, partly because I believe what Goody's saying. He's said right from the beginning of the season that the goal this season is to be playing our best football August and September, and every single thing is geared around that goal. And again, the interview that Maxi did, he was asked exactly this question. The question was, he was asked, where do you see this group in terms of playing your best footy in the back half of the year? And his answer was, love to be where the Swans are at, of course, but we've been there. In 2022, we were 11-zip and we went out in straight sets. It's all about being in form at the right part of the year. He referenced the Blues and the Giants last year as examples of teams hitting form at quote-unquote the right part of the year. He said that he's really excited to try to get there to the right part of the year. We're not there yet, but hopefully with a couple of little tweaks, and we keep smacking in on the contest in our defence side of the brand, and hopefully we get there by the back half of the year. It's clearly how they've planned for the year. I mean, they wouldn't have planned for Gus going out. Track is a hammer blow. Like losing our best player is a complete hammer blow, because I would argue he's, there's Maxi and there's Track, particularly with Ollie down. But I think Clary he'll get fitter. Petty will get fitter. Our team will get fitter. And I'm actually really quite up about this week. It's like a free throw at the stumps. There's so little expectations. We're out to $5, which is the longest I can recall us being for any match for years. I think we're going to surprise a lot of people, including both of you guys, I suspect, and 95% of Demonland this week. I have no doubt in my mind they've set themselves for this game. They've got a 6-day break. They'll do very little training on the track. Maxi referenced it again in this interview, talking about that we've got a real rivalry against the Lions, and he inferred that we're set. That the planning for this game was right from the get-go. Straight as soon as the siren went, they were talking about this game. He said that of this, we have a real rival. I'm really pumped for Friday night, he said twice. We have a real rival with the Lions. Goodies, he set it up so well, Goody, that I think we're going to see a strong effort from our club up there. And so I've got a real strong feeling that we'll do a hell of a lot better than most people think. And I'm actually, I know I'm optimistic, but I'm actually really confident about Friday night. Win's going to be a tall order at any time at the Gabba. So, I'm not going so far as to say, that I'm confident of a win, but I think there's a chance we win this game. And I don't bet on Melbourne games, but if I was going to, I'd take the line in this game because we're a lot better than what people are suggesting. And I strongly suspect that we've set ourselves for this game. And a bit of context, our best game this season so far is the Cats game, and that was the second game after our first bye.
All right. We'll talk more about the preview of the game in a moment. But first, Casey, the Casey Demons experienced another disappointing loss in their round 13 clash against North Melbourne, falling short by 6 points. The outcome contrasted sharply with their previous encounter at the same venue, where Casey triumphed by a staggering 101 points over the Kangaroos. It's important to note that on that day, Brodie Grundy had 35 possessions, James Jordan had 36, James Harms had 26, and Tom McDonald kicked 5 goals. 3 of those players are now playing seniors at other clubs, and the other one is now a defender. In this match, Casey struggled to maintain consistency with a few players replicating their earlier performances. Mitch White, the team captain, again proved his worth with 27 disposals and a goal, while Andy Wakefield stood out, amassing 35 disposals and contributing significantly to the team. Young forward Matt Jefferson booted 4 goals. The loss has significant implications for Casey, effectively putting them out of contention for the finals and ending their hopes for the wildcard matches with 8 games to go in the season. And I believe you boys both watched the game. Don't go too in depth into it because we're getting long in the tooth in the show.
I'll start then. Casey have only won 3 games this year, and it shows. There isn't a great deal of talent pushing up there. It was great that Jefferson kicked 4 goals. He's developing as a forward. He's starting to lead as a forward should, and that builds confidence and all, particularly in a young player. I just wish he'd start to jump. He keeps his feet on the ground too much. You can see how well JVR is, and JVR is going to be a standout. Utterly agree with Binman on that one. But JVR jumps. Jefferson doesn't jump yet, which is a real concern. But he's still strong and needs to build up a lot more. Verrill in the ruck showed he is miles ahead of Fullerton. If anybody thinks Fullerton's going to be playing seniors, they're sadly mistaken.
He's got a concussion now? Or
he's got a concussion in this game just to boot. Of the Melbourne Football Club listed players, 6 of them had less than 8 disposals in the game. There's just nothing there. Shaki was almost non-existent. I like the look of Kentfield. He's got a long way to go, but he's only played a couple of minutes in each game, but he's got the right sort of body that's going to grow. So it'll be interesting to watch him develop. But he's a developing player. North Melbourne had some really good players in their side. Their forward, what's his name, Fisher, Finbar and Maley, was just superb. Really strong overhead mark, big unit, really big unit. They were playing Lazaro and McKercher. McKercher is going to be an absolute gun. He will be playing seniors very, very soon. He is such a... I think they said North had 2 of the top 4 draft picks from last year playing in this side, and it really shows. North are definitely going to be on the up in a big way. They've got so much talent there now. They haven't got a defensive line in their seniors, but the guys that are coming through from below are really going to push them up the ladder very, very quickly. McAdam didn't do enough. Went for ridiculous marks again. Gave away 50 metres. Billings was got lots of touches, but not really effective. Kept kicking the ball to the opposition in particular. So we only lost by 6 points, but then North aren't serious contenders in any case, and at this level of competition.
I watched the game too. It's the first time I've watched for ages a full game, and I thought you missed one. Like, I thought he was the best player on the ground, and I was really pleased to see it was AMW. I thought he played great. He collected the ball, 35 possessions again. I think this is is it third or fourth game in a row he's got 30 possessions plus, Andy? Something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
I thought he played really well, made good decisions, playing an interesting role. It's like sort of, he was all over the place. So I thought he was our standout, really. Varel was pretty quiet, but his contest was okay. And I really enjoyed the sort of forward craft that's developing for Jefferson. Give him another year. I think they extend his contract, Andy? Am I imagining that? Jefferson?
I don't recall, but keep talking and I'll.
So I thought he was good. It was disappointing to lose that game, but speaking of good players, you're going to start a thread on Demonland with that sort of talk that George, for people to say, I can just see it now. Will Roos win the flag before the Demons? It's like writes itself, doesn't it? But geez, they do have some talent, not least of which in the seniors. That Sheasel kid can play, can't he? He's a super player, and so is Wardlaw. Wardlaw reminds me so much of Jack Viney, but he's got better skills probably. So they've got some really good players come through. That's for sure.
Jefferson signed on last year in July for a further 2 years, and he'll remain a Demon until the end of 2026. So yes,
yeah. So I think they'll use the same approach they did with Van Rooyen and give him. There's no point bringing him up yet, but
I think Goody said today that he's very close.
Say again.
Goody said today apparently in a presser that he is very close.
Jefferson to very close to Slate. Really?
Well, that doesn't mean that he'll be picked next week, but. Must be happy.
Yeah, okay. But that's good.
What else he's going to say? I don't think he's going to say, nah,
I'm
not going to play him.
He's very far away.
All right, let's get to injuries and changes. Both Jake Lever and Lockie Hunter should be available for selection this week. It was reported this morning on Twitter that Christian Salem, who was subbed out of the North game, tested that knee concern at training today, but the club is confident he'll be right to face Brisbane, which probably means he'll miss the next 4 to 6 weeks. Jake Melksham is now only 1 to 2 weeks away from a return, which most likely will be through Casey. Ben Brown is now listed as a TBC with his documented knee concern, so I reckon we've probably seen the last of Benny Brown. Changes versus Brisbane. So as I mentioned, likely Jake Lever will return to the team for the knee injury sustained in the early stages of our round 10 match against the Eagles. He's missed the last 4 games. Salem will have to prove his fitness. So given our luck, let's just assume that he's not going to play. And it was announced just a few hours ago that rookie listed player Andy Menzies-Wakefield will make his debut this week on the back of his 35 possessions for Casey. So with all of that, Big Man followed by George, who are your ins and outs this week in a game that I like to call rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, Bris Vegas edition.
Right, well, we get Tolstoy's Nudge, which is a great name for a poster. There's some good names flying around. Did I say I like Fritter and Turner? That's a good one as well. In the chat box, he's got the tip. AMW debuting this week, boys. In case you aren't aware, so
I just mentioned that, and it was announced 3 hours ago.
Oh, was it? There you go.
No,
I hadn't heard that before. I pumped up AMW, so because that's I'm not listening to Footy Media. So where was that announced? Was that in a press conference?
Melbourne. No, Melbourne put it up on their Twitter or on their Facebook, on their socials.
All right, well, I'm a good judge, aren't I? So, pumped him up for his game, and next thing you know, he gets selected retrospectively. So, Tolstoy's nudge.
So he's playing.
So George Lever and finally back in element, nice and dour.
Yes, back
that's
to
why this
natural habitat.
So successful.
So basically, I would say Lever and AMW are a lock.
AMW.
Who's coming out?
His debut, so probably the pup will get dropped and AMW will be the sub. No, I don't know.
Unless or if Salem is out, because maybe it's a possibility that Salem's out.
Well, I would have said unchanged, but AMW coming in. Well, I mean, we did win.
Well, Lever, why unchanged? Lever, you're not going to put Lever in if he's ready to go.
Well, Lever's in for Tomo. That's given.
Tomo.
And again, I think we saw. I don't want to be down on Tomo, and I think he's he's been great for the club, and I really think they should try him up forward. I've been banging on about this for a couple of years, but we saw on the weekend again some of the problems of some of his deficiencies. He's slow off the mark, and he's a one-on-one player. I would have, even though he may killed Larkey, so it's hard to argue that was a wrong move. I would have liked to seen Tomlinson on Larkey and freeing up May to be a bit more aggressive higher up the ground, but you're probably robbing Peter to pay Paul. But yeah, Lever comes in for Tomo. AMW, I don't know, maybe maybe we could go small and Fritter could come out, for instance, or, I'm not too sure. But it would be pretty tough on Pup to get dropped, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, that was what one of the questions was asked about the way we sort of treat not that necessarily the father of sons,
I don't think that we've done that before. How often have we dropped players after one game? Woody doesn't do that.
Well,
and I think after him running that tackle down, I would be surprised. But it's interesting because AMW will be really curious to see where they play him. But maybe Windsor, he's looking gassed in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I'd hope that he plays, but he has looked, a shadow of himself in the last 3 or 4 weeks, hasn't he, Windsor?
George, any thoughts on?
No, it's leave it for Tomo, poor old Tomo again. But yeah, like Bin Man said, what you see is what you get with Tomo, and it doesn't get any better. And when the better player is available, he goes out. The other one I thought AMW coming in might replace his Bowie.
Yeah, or Blake Howes maybe.
I wouldn't give away the height, but
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but Bowie's off his best. So he was the other possibility. I don't think they'll drop Pup. They didn't play McCasey this week deliberately because it would be a fight.
Have?
Oh, they could have, but like they played North played Stevenson, for example.
Okay.
But it would be a 5-day break for him to Friday. So they're obviously keeping him available to play in this game. So. Yeah, Bowie was the other one for me that might drop out.
Just on the injury thing as well, someone who was at training today, a training report was posted today on Demon Land, but it was sort of not Chinese whispers, but it was passed on by somebody else who said that Viney wasn't there, and there was also a training report from the other day, the sort of stretch out session that they do the first day after a game during the week, that Viney did someone say was in a boot and a Birkenstock on the other foot, and
footy boot though. Footy boot and Birkenstock.
And Birkenstock. So there could be an injury there. Viney said to the person that he's playing, but
I think it was dress up days.
I don't know. He might just not be training this week because he's carrying something. I don't know. So
he's probably had his foot
fingers crossed, because that's a disaster if Viney's out as well.
Yeah, he's probably had his foot amputated, but he'll be playing this week.
He'll play. Let's get into a preview. The Dees hit the road again for their 5th interstate trip this season when they head up to Brisbane to take on the Lions under lights on Friday night at the Gabba. This is their 2nd meeting this year, and we've yet to play 3 other teams so far this season. So how's that for the fixture? The last time these two teams met in round 5, the Dees were shell-shocked and by three-quarter time had only managed 3 goals and were 7 goals in arrears. A 5-2 last quarter made the scoreboard look more respectable on paper as the Demons only went down by 22 points, but the writing may have already been on the wall for the Demons all the way back in April. And since then, the Dees have won 4 and the Lions have won 5 and drawn 1, but the Lions are in form and firing and are coming off a 79-point win in Adelaide against Port, kicking a massive 23 goals, 14, 152. And if the Dees play half-hearted footy and can't hit the scoreboard, then this match could get very ugly very early, and we'll be praying to the electricity gods to turn out the lights at the Gabba once again. So, George, followed by Big Man, can we beat the Lions, and how are we going to do it?
I'm hoping someone can provide the answer, because I don't know how we're going to kick enough goals at the end of the day. When we can only have 15 shots on a perfect day against the bottom side in the league, I don't think we've got a hope in hell, quite frankly, against the certainly one of the informed sides and the who've got most of their players on the field playing at the Gabba. They're the ones who are certainly coming right at the right time in the season. I just can't. I think our defenders will do a great job. I don't think we've got the firepower forward to get us over the line.
And I said before, I don't think it's the firepower. It's whether we're spreading well enough. I think we'll find out very soon whether I'm on the money in terms of us setting ourselves for this game. If we've set ourselves for this game, we'll be running on top of the ground. That's what creates forward opportunities, is getting it in there at pace and moving it quickly from the back half into the forward half. As I said, I'm pretty bullish about Friday night, and they've clear. I think they've set themselves. I think it's a good, interesting sort of analogue that we flogged them by 62 points off the bye last year, or was it 22? I can't remember.
It was 22.
Yeah, 22.
Didn't we flog them late in the year in the last round?
Yeah, we did last year. We match up well against them. We've sort of adopted some of their strategies around their holding and chipping and still moving forward. Clearly they're up and about at the moment, but we've got a defence that matches up really well against their weapons up forward. I'm actually pretty confident. I'm pretty confident of a good showing. A win will be great, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near the sort of blowout that a lot of people are fearing. As I said, the 6-day break, they won't have done anything. They'll do little more than just sort of light sessions this week. The weather, by the way, is cloudy, slight chance of shower, light winds becoming southeasterly 15 to 20 kilometres.
I've got my app says no precipitation for the day, but that doesn't mean anything. But
0 to 1 mil according to BOM.
It's about 18 degrees at game time, dropping to about 16, 15 by the end of the game. So humidity is at about 75% at game time.
Is the ground going to be spongy, you think? That's the other thing for us to worry about.
Well, I'll have a look. Is it raining during the week at all? Is the thing to look at. It's raining Thursday, a 55% chance, but only for a little bit of the day. And the rest of the week, clear and sunny, sort of cloudy.
Good thing the game's not in Melbourne because it's going to rain on Saturday.
We probably need the rain.
And just we're 5:10. We opened at 4:55, which I thought was the longest I've seen for ages. 5:10, we're on the drift. So the punters don't share my confidence. That's but
don't you always say follow the money? Follow where the money's
exactly.
Going.
So, I'd follow the money and look for value. That's the thing, is you need to be looking for value. And if I was having a bet in this game, it would be at the line. The line is 29 points. And I reckon, a lot of fans, definitely by the sound at YouTube, will be lucky to get within 5 goals of them. I think it'll be a much more competitive match than what people are suggesting.
All right.
Don't bet on it, though.
To gamble responsibly. Yeah. All right, let's leave it there for tonight.
It's going to be Friday, by the way, is like it's political Super Bowl because the debate, the US presidential debate's on Friday, and so I've got the day off to watch the debate and then the footy at night. It's just going to be a big day if the Dees win.
Jeez. That's a double header. It could be a disaster. Okay, let's leave it there. We'll be back next week. If you want to listen to the show live, head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. Thank you to our 5-star reviewer on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to Chris. Thank you to our voicemailers, Salty and Roaster. And as always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to the Pearl, a.k.a. George, McVeasy, like a Sunday morning, Pitmaster, Nairobi Demon, JJ Rogan, Travi14, Magnus, John Demonic, Bucknecker, Dean Minion, Shorty Short, Singer, What, Say What, Radish D, Go Lordy, El Diablo 14, Lefty, Bigfoot, Jane02, Garbo, 58er, Lazy, Desperate, Wells 11, Demonic Final Fantasy, Oh My D's, Colm, and then a couple who questions didn't get on because had time issues. Demon WA, Clintosaurus, Demonized, and Delightful Play. And thank you, as always, to my co-hosts, George and B-Man. Thank you to you, our loyal listeners, hopefully. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll read it out on next week's show. Go Demons!
Red Leggers!
Come on, Demons! Come on, Demons! Come on, Demons! Come on.